Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you having good day. In this video, I am gonna talk about what if Deku was brutally trained by Mysterio and All Might. Part 1. And subscribe for more, also like this video, that would be super duper awesome, helps me to stay motivated. And thanks to the author of this story, this video is possible. So do check it out and show some love. Name of this fanfic is Midoriya, the Master of Illusions. By Apprentice of Mysterio. So do check out the author of this story and check out entire work. Also, if you have any complaints about videos, feel free to comment, I will try to improve them. Let's jump in video. Tokyo was on fire. A massive monster, a red lizard creature with horns and fiery breath, was raining destruction down upon the people fleeing. A shaky phone camera captured the beast as it spat a massive fireball at a helicopter before switching to footage from a newscopter. It turned to the fleeing civilians and raised its head high into the sky to unleash a massive roar to the heavens. Bryo. The beast turned to attack the nearest office building, but before it could, the lizard vanished, and in its place were 5 floating metal eyes, each one the size of an SUV, and placed where its limbs and tail should have been. The 4 that behaved like talons had massive metal blades on the underside, while the tail was covered in spiked armor. High above them all, where the head should have been, was a similar orb, only this one had a pair of mechanical jaws and plasma cannons. Piloting the vehicle was a curious figure. It was a man, in a scaly green suit, boxy brass-colored gauntlets and boots, a purple cape with eye clasps, and an opaque acrylic dome helmet. Within the dome, the figure was panicking, pressing switches and buttons in a panic. Whoops, looks like all Misty's having technical difficulties. A cheerful voice spoke in English, the speaker emerging into view. He was a man in red and blue spandex with a web design and silver teardrop-shaped eyepieces, and hanging from his shoulder was a boxy device on a strap, an adhesive label marked Spidey's jamming device, helpfully explaining what it was. The hero, Spider-Man, turned to the news camera. As he spoke, a translation appeared in the news feed. "Don't worry about Mysterio here, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, on loan from good old New York City, can handle this." With a salute and a distinct-sounding thwip. From his web shooters, the man swung off the copter to fight the villain. The video continued playing on loop in the background, not that anyone was really paying attention to it. The children near it were too busy focusing on their tour guide to watch the footage. And while the masked hero Spider-Man, real name Peter Parker, fought many Japan-based villains back in the pre-quirk era such as Daken and the Silver Samurai, his confrontation with the quirkless supervillain Mysterio, real name Quentin Beck, remains among the most well-remembered for the scope of the battle and for being the last time the two clashed before Beck died of brain and lung cancer. The museum tour guide recited the speech with mildly bored disinterest as she had repeated it to plenty of other tour groups before, probably hundreds of times. The children were still enraptured by the story though. After all, in a world where everyone was born with powers, hearing about how a young man got his by mere happenstance was fascinating. After all, if a quirkless boy could get his powers through radiation and a spider, why couldn't it happen again? This point of fact was especially noteworthy to a young 7-year-old boy with red shoes and green-tinted black hair, young Izuku Midoriya. The boy listened in awe at the tour guide's words. Hearing the exploits of one of the men who laid the foundation for the world he lived in was inspiring. Especially with the news he had been hit with at the doctor's office 3 years ago. Had it really been that long? 3 years since that appointment with Dr. Tsubasa. 3 years since he was diagnosed as quirkless. 3 years that doctor said he couldn't be a hero because of it. Midoriya forced those thoughts out of his head. He may have been born quirkless, but there must have been a way he could get a quirk. That's why he was here on this school trip. To learn about Spider-Man and see if there was any new information he could get about how he got his quirk. And here, we have the original pod used in the villain attack. Pulled from his thoughts, Midoriya looked up at the next exhibit. Once upon a time, this machine was an advanced vehicle from which a quirkless man brought Japan to its knees. And even though there was a chunk of the side missing and the plexiglass was shattered, it was still an impressive vehicle. Stupid vehicle. Looks like that dumb bubble face ripped off Dr. Eggman. At least, to most people. The derisive comment was spoken aloud by a boy with ashy blonde hair and a confident smirk. Kitsuki Bakugo, preening from the snickers from his classmates, smirked as the tour guide continued on as if he had not shouted. "I think it's cool." Midoriya had spoken before he could stop himself. Bakugo looked over with a sour look marring his face. "What did you say, Deku?" "Ah yes, Deku," Bakugo's favorite insult to Midoriya ever since he learned that his once best friend was quirkless. Midoriya idly wondered if Bakugo came up with it as a response to his own nickname of Kaken, or if he would ever get sick of Deku, but kept those thoughts silent. Instead, he turned to respond to the boy and explain himself. Well, Mysterio, a quirkless guy, was able to do a lot just with some technology, smoke and mirrors, and He still got his ass whooped in less than 3 minutes by Spider-Man. Bakugo interrupted, keeping his voice quiet. But if a quirkless man could keep someone like Spider-Man at bay with just his brain and gadgets, then maybe I could. Quiet in the back. Their homeroom teacher spoke up. Midoriya fell silent, not able to meet his snickering peers' eyes. It was always the same. Bakugo would get away with interrupting the lecture, while Midoriya was silenced. After all, how could the glory child with the amazing and strong quirk be in trouble? Midoriya knew it was unfair, but he kept silent and his face down. If he hadn't, he might have noticed the ugly scowl on his ex-best friend's face. Not long afterwards, lunch break came. Most of the students were packed in the cafeteria, either eating lunch as their parents had packed or overpriced food that was available at the counter. Most of them were, that is. 2 students were in the bathroom, and it was not for using the toilets. Where do you get off thinking you can be a hero? Bakugo snarled, his hands popping with small explosions. Midoriya was against the wall, shaking as he clutched his open backpack. What? You're a quirkless Deku. You can't be a hero. If you tried, you'd be squished like a bug. Bakugo interrupted, slamming his palm against the tile. With his other hand, he reached into Midoriya's notebook, filled with childish sketches of gadgets and costumes, to help him imitate All Might. You saw how that Mysterio loser fared against someone with a quirk. His dumb gadgets couldn't help him for very long, and neither would any help against you. But I could. You're weak Deku, useless. And I'll keep reminding you of that until it sticks. Bakugo reached for Midoriya's throat, and at that moment, Midoriya panicked. Instead of taking it like he usually did, Midoriya chose to act. He dodged Bakugo's hand and barreled past him, his skinny legs running faster than before. He sped out of the bathroom and ran down the hallways. He thought of running to the cafeteria, but Bakugo's friends, for lack of a better term, would be there to help him hold Midoriya down. So instead he ran back down the hallway the class had just visited. Deku, get back here. Midoriya quickened his pace. But the open layout of the museum, done to show trophies of past hero exploits, offered little in the way of safe havens. Taking momentary shelter behind a statue depicting All Might's debut to catch his breath, Midoriya glanced around, the gears in his head turning. Bakugo was approaching fast, so the simulation room was out. The hallway to the next area was too far away. The All Might statue was too big for him to climb. The diorama of Wolverine fighting Silver Samurai wasn't too far, but one quick look would easily reveal him to Bakugo or his minions. The hologram of Fragzilla's monster avatar was just out. Same with the mannequin of Sunfire. That only left one place to hide. Mysterio's robot kaiju head. The quick look around showed no one was watching, so young Midoriya ran to the pod, ducking under the stanchion with little effort, and jumped into the cockpit. The inside was spacious, even with the mannequin of Mysterio in the cockpit. The once bright buttons were unlit, a colorful sprawl that once commanded great destruction. Midoriya held his breath, forcing himself to calm down, but upon hearing loud footsteps approach, Midoriya realized his mistake. The pod, left unrepaired, was still missing its side, exposing him to Bakugo, who, by some act of mercy, had yet to notice him. Quiet as he could, Midoriya slid under the cockpit's control panel, backing up against the inside of the floor space with his open backpack to his chest when something small bumped up against the back of his head. That sensation gave way to a quiet click, followed by a small thud. Looking behind him, Midoriya was treated to something he had never expected. The loose panel had fallen in the side wall, and within it was an empty space. Curiosity getting the better of himself, Midoriya quietly moved the panel away. Behind where the panel once stood was a small cavity of long since rusted wires and cables. Nestled between them was a thick rectangle of sealed plastic. Pulling it out, Midoriya looked over it. It wasn't heavy by any means, not much heavier than his textbook, in fact. Gently opening the seal, Midoriya pulled out a thick green notebook, well used judging by the scratches on the edge of the cover and faded English text. Confused, Midoriya flipped through it, only to find that all the pages, despite having been bent, torn, and dog-eared through repeated handling, were seemingly blank. What in the Midoriya muttered when a massive fist grabbed him and pulled him out screaming. Dropping the notebook, he flailed in panic, only to come face to face with his very angry teacher. Looking around, Midoriya saw a smirking Bakugo and 2 security guards glaring at him. Then Midoriya remembered where he was and what he had done in full sight of the building's security cameras. Sorry. He whimpered. It took many apologies from his teacher and 3 weeks of detention, but Midoriya was let off the hook for his transgression, though he was not allowed back at that museum again. Midoriya was just glad that Bakugo was satisfied with what happened and wasn't going to pursue him again. That night, his mother Izuku Midoriya berated him for his foolishness and sent him to bed early with no more hero merch purchases for a month. Midoriya was silent throughout it. It had been another bust on his mission. Midoriya was frustrated and in that frustration he tossed his backpack on the floor with a solid thud. Wait. Midoriya looked at his backpack again. That wasn't the right noise. Being that there had been a field trip that day, his backpack only had his hero notebook, pencil case, and an All Might model he had bought at the gift shop. So why did it sound like there was something heavy in there? Actually, now that he thought about it, his backpack had been heavier than it should have been on the way home. He had been too preoccupied with Kaken's words and the anger of his teacher and mother to really think about it, but now that he had. Midoriya went to his backpack and unzipped it. Inside was what he expected, his pencils, an eraser, some crumbled up scraps of paper, a bent trading card depicting Endeavor's original outfit, and his 2 notebooks. Wait, 2. He only had one on him, so where did the other? Midoriya froze. The notebook from the exhibit. Security must have thought it was his and put it in his bag. Midoriya took out the notebook, looking it over. It was so weird, he thought. The book showed plenty of use, but it was blank from front to back. And yet it had been so well hidden inside that kaiju robot head. Why? And who would put such a thing inside of Mysterio's? Mysterio. But this revelation, Midoriya began muttering, trying to logically reason out the unexpected circumstances before him. Mysterio's kaiju scheme had been his last major appearance before his death, and the villain was notorious for being motivated by fame and glory. Since he was diagnosed a year prior, Mysterio must have known he was dying. Therefore it stands to reason that he would leave something of his behind. Midoriya muttered rapidly. The notebook must be how he wanted to put down his final notes and thoughts, but why leave it blank? Midoriya sat on his bed, puzzling over the paradox, until he glanced at an old poster of the Fantastic Four. More specifically, he glanced at Susan Storm Richards. Unless he didn't. He must have used invisible ink to hide the writing. It makes sense, it's an old spy movie cliché, and Mysterio loved old movies like that. But how to make it visible? Checking his cell phone, Midoriya looked up ways to detect invisible ink and quickly found one involving heat. Going to the bathroom and grabbing his mother's hairdryer, Midoriya bolted to his room, plugged the dryer into his wall socket, turned to the open journal. Then paused. This isn't mine. He thought. This is museum property, technically. It's a part of hero history, I can't just ruin it like this. It should be turned in, given to someone. A pro-hero or the police. Midoriya bit his lip. Reluctantly, he put the hairdryer away. He was about to close the window on his phone when he spotted a YouTube video. Blacklight D for cheap. Well, it can't hurt to at least take a few notes. A blacklight won't hurt the book or ruin it, so if I'm careful, it should be okay, right? And it's not like the museum was aware of it, anyways. It took an old LED flashlight, a blue Sharpie, a purple Sharpie, and some All Might endorsed all stick tape, but Midoriya was able to whip up an improvised blacklight. So, under his bed, wearing a cheap painter's mask and his mom's dish gloves, Midoriya settled down and activated the light. Lo and behold, upon the cover of the notebook, currently resting on a plastic garbage bag, was Mysterio's infamous eye symbol, gazing upon him as if it had awoken from an ancient slumber. In a way, it had. Midoriya couldn't hold back the gasp as his excitement shot up. He was right. It was the late Mysterio's notebook. Ideas flooded through his head, images of super suits, gauntlets, and animatronic monsters at his beck and call, him using the illusions to scare bad guys into surrendering, him commanding a legion of robotic monsters to save children, and him flying above them on a cloud of smoke. His helmet under his head, laughing in joy to the in-awe civilians. Do not fear, for all mystery is here. Midoriya eagerly flipped open the cover and flipped the book open to the first page. Then to the next page. Then the next. And 3 more times, each flip making his smile fade. In his excitement, Midoriya had forgotten one simple issue with his discovery. One that set back his daydreams by a good amount. Mysterio was American. And thus spoke English. Which 7-year-old Midoriya could barely read. Thank All Might for the internet. It had taken him the better part of 2 months, 3 weeks, and 5 days of painstaking translation, with detentions and classes thrown in, but eventually, he did it. Midoriya had translated the entire notebook to Japanese. It wasn't a perfect translation. He was sure he got several words and his grammar wrong, but he was able to get the gist of Mysterio's words. Not that much of it was really usable. Mysterio apparently wrote the majority of the book with details of his early childhood in Riverside, California, his attending the Stan Winston School of Arts as a young man, his work in Hollywood as a special effects artist, and his career fighting Spider-Man, sometimes alongside the notorious Sinister Six. All Might above, this man hated Spider-Man. He admired Spider-Man's genius in creating his gadgets, especially after Peter Parker was outed to the world following America's Superhero Registration Act, but wow, this man hated Spidey. Entire pages were filled with rants against him and his accursed sixth sense, to quote the notebook. That being said, some of it was helpful to Midoriya. The man detailed his chemical formulas for his various gases, the circuitry lining of his domes, and even an improved form of latex that moved seamlessly with the face to create a perfect disguise. The craziest part though was that in the back of the book, right before he detailed a plan to put himself in the history books for good, was a hand-drawn map. A map that, after some comparisons between a modern map and a map from that era, showed a lair hidden in what was now Mustafu. Needless to say, Midoriya was in shock. This had to have been a mistake. The chances of that should have been impossible. But if it wasn't? But if it was? Midoriya had to check. So, one weekend, he packed his bag. Midoriya filled it with everything he thought he'd need. Money, his third hero analysis notebook, some pencils, his cell phone, a packed lunch, and last of all, the notebook, sealed in a new plastic Ziploc bag. Midoriya had debated on leaving it home, but he didn't know if there had been a code or passphrase or something that he needed to use to safely enter a villain's lair. Throwing on his favorite All Might brand hoodie, Midoriya left his room. "Mom, I'm going out for a few hours," he shouted as he went for the door. "Wait, where are you going?" she asked. "The woods," he said with practiced ease. It felt bad to lie to her, but it was the only thing he could think of. It wasn't unreasonable. Only months ago he had gone with Bakugo to search for bugs to catch. Unfortunately, after that Bakugo had started to distance himself from Midoriya, not that he had told his mom that. "Fine, just be careful," she shouted back. Midoriya left and made it to the train station. Pulling out his phone, Midoriya looked at the picture he took of the map. It wasn't as simple as whipping out the paper and following it, since street names had changed and buildings remodeled, but with the internet, he was able to follow the map to his final destination. Corellia. Like most cities, Mustafu had its slums and bad neighborhoods. Turns out that Mysterio had chosen one for his lair, though if it had been a slum when Mysterio put his base here, Midoriya had no idea. But as it was, the X of Mysterio's map led to a small street in the heart of the Corellia neighborhood. Looking around, Midoriya saw nothing that immediately screamed hidden evil lair. Then again, if it had been obvious it wouldn't have been a very good evil lair. Midoriya mused to himself. Still, Midoriya had been hoping for something that would have helped. All he could see was a run-down apartment building, a boarded-up DVD store, a filthy convenience store that had one person working the counter, and what looked like it had once been a family-owned Korean store, now being used by some Burakumen as shelter. A few of them gave him some looks, curious about the unfamiliar boy walking on his own, but they didn't move from their spot, so Midoriya didn't feel too threatened by them. Midoriya stopped to check his map for the 5th time. Seeing that he was indeed in the right spot and that there had been no other indicators about where to go, Midoriya sat on a cement bench, biting his lip in thought. The map had been accurate, he was sure, but there was nowhere else to go, so one of these buildings had to be it. So for now, Midoriya thought about everything he knew of Mysterio. The man was proud. He was basically a magician. He loved old movies. He had a cousin who became Jack-O-Lantern. He once tried to drive Daredevil. Wait. Movies. Midoriya spun around to the DVD store and went to the front door. A few tugs proved it had been locked, same with the front window. Midoriya shook his head. Too obvious, I should try the back door. Going around the back, Midoriya sidestepped a napping old woman and went to the back door. It was locked, but on the doorframe, in the bottom corner, was an eye carved into the wood. Mysterio's eye. Midoriya smiled, he was on the right track. But how to get in? Midoriya looked around, patting the walls and tugging on the doorframe when he found it. On the wall near the doorknob was a hidden panel with a speaker, rusted over with age, but the button beneath flickered on. A good sign, he hoped. Leaning forward, Mysterio stopped when he realized he had no idea what to say, so he hoped that there was someone else on the other end. Hello. I found a green notebook. Written in invisible ink. No response, though it was possible that whoever was there was waiting for a password. So, recalling what little Midoriya knew of old movies, he tried the first phrase that came to mind. Cladu, Barada, Nikto. Nothing, though Midoriya thought that made sense. He had been very lucky so far, but there was no chance he'd get it on the first try. Open sesame. He tried again. Nothing. The world is quiet here. Wasn't that either. I come in peace. No response. Bolt sent me. Nope. Swordfish. Zilch. Lohimura. Nada. Password. The speaker made a sound suspiciously similar to a raspberry being blown, but otherwise did nothing. Midoriya sighed and sat against the wall. Nothing he knew worked, so he returned to his favorite source of help, the internet. But tapping the wall in specific spots didn't help. Nor did attempting to speak in Parselting. The boy was starting to get frustrated, but refused to give up. Thus, Midoriya decided that now was time to be smarter, so he pulled out the notebook, covered in sticky notes that translated the English words, and skimmed it. There weren't any passwords or phrases written down, and Midoriya was about to give up when he thought of something. Mysterio was a fan of movies, so he must have had favorite directors. And seeing how Mysterio was putting him on an Indiana Jones-style treasure hunt for his lair, he'd want the right kind of people to find it. Not superheroes, that much was obvious, but not supervillains either. He was very clear on his opinions of people who would take up his act without his permission. So, Midoriya thought of only one kind of person that could have gotten his blessing. Movie buffs. So, with that in mind, Midoriya looked up the films of Stan Winston, Jim Henson, Roger Corman, Ray Harryhausen, and Peter Jackson, all of whom Mysterio mentioned in his notebook at one point or another. On that last one, he struck gold. Standing up, he went to the door, pushed the button and spoke with confidence. "Ellen." For 2 seconds, nothing, but then the door swung open. Shocked that he finally got it, Midoriya immediately ran into the building and shut the door behind him. It looked to be the back room, near the offices and storage, but now empty of anything besides dusty furniture and webs. Snorting at the irony of spiders in Mysterio's home, Midoriya looked around and quickly spotted a shelf of DVDs. Jaunta savvy enough, Midoriya dragged an old chair to the shelf and climbed atop it to reach the top shelf. Scanning the movies, Midoriya spotted the movie Get Smart and, recalling the movie's intro with the secret doors, pulled it down. With a rumble, the bookshelf moved aside and the wall slid open, revealing a spiral staircase. Midoriya gulped and looked back. This was his last chance to back out. He didn't know what he'd find down there. It could have been a death trap, a mechanical monster, or a gaming room for all Midoriya knew. But he had come this far. So, pulling his All Might hoodie closer around himself, he carefully walked down the steps. After a few minutes, Midoriya exited the stairs. Before him was a doorway, with 3 locks on it. Connected to it was a screen and keypad with 3 questions upon it. In Jim Henson's greatest work, what was Chamberlain's true form's name? And they live, money talks. What does it say? What do I consider to be the greatest trick done by Ray Bradhouse? Rolling his eyes, Midoriya did a quick internet and notebook search and typed in the answers. Silsel. This is your god. The wall-crawling demon. With a hum and a groan, the door opened up and the room beyond lit up. He entered a room big enough to hold his elementary school. At one time, it might have been a tunnel to reroute floodwaters, but it had since been repurposed. The stonework reached up high, and hanging from the pillars were metal discs depicting Mysterio's eye design. All around him in sealed glass cases were disassembled robots in costumes of every kind. Heroes, villains, aliens, monsters, knights, pirates, dinosaurs, all were here, half assembled, the latex peeled back to show the inner workings. Hanging above, suspended from the ceiling were various monsters and machines, ranging from Chinese dragons, robotic animals, a stone Mayan warrior, and a lifelike Hulk. Under glass protection were dioramas and models of various Mysterio battles and schemes, including a carnival with a tiny Spider-Man, an elevator shaft depicting screaming people in hell reaching out to grab Daredevil, and a burning Symkaria with drones shining red light at 3 small figures of Spider-Man, Black Cat, and Silver Sable. Computers and notebooks, covered in plastic sheets, aligned a side wall, and on the other were laminated sketches for new monsters and equipment, pinned against a corkboard with now outdated blueprints of Tokyo's museums and banks. In the back of the room, behind glass cases, several costumes, all of which Midoriya recognized from the notebook as Mysterio's various suits, stood at the ready. All of the villains' costumes had been recreated, labeled, and backlit. Lastly, in the middle of the room was a massive stone chalice, surrounded by candles and strange runes. Stepping forward, Midoriya didn't see the laser tripwire on the ground and so yelped in shock when holographic fireworks suddenly burst out of the fake candles as the lights glowed neon purple and green. From within the stone chalice a pillar of smoke billowed out and within it, spectral and see-through, was a familiar figure. With a crackle of hidden speakers, the ghost of Mysterio spoke. Wahahaha, congratulations, intrepid fan. I, the ghost of the great Mysterio, applaud your intelligence, imagination, and resolve. You have deciphered the means of entering the secret lair and thus, all of Mysterio's earthly possessions are yours. His armor, formulas, technology, all yours. Now, step forth and receive your. The spectral figure, a hologram, Midoriya realized, stopped his monologue and looked around in confusion. At the same time, several security cameras in the room lit up and moved about until it finally spotted Midoriya, hiding behind a mannequin in a zombie costume. Adar, are you kidding me? It shouted in anger, all grandiose posing lost. A mere child solved that complex labyrinth of puzzles. Yo, you're him? Mysterio, Midoriya asked, staying behind the zombie in fear. Oh, right, Japan. One moment. The hologram muttered, before suddenly speaking in Japanese. How's this? Yo, you can speak Japanese? Midoriya asked in shock. Well, of course. This is Japan. Chances were, the fan who uncovered my lair was going to speak the local language. It quickly explained. But to answer your question, technically yes. I'm an AI modeled after a brain scan of the original Mysterio, made by Dr. Octopus as a favor to the late Quentin Beck. You may call me Tsuburaya, after the man who brought Godzilla to life. Oh. Midoriya's eyes lit up in wonder as he stepped out from behind the mannequin. The hologram floated over, inspecting the boy who stared at him in awe. After a moment, the AI spoke up. So you found Beck's old lair. Mind telling me the year? Oh, it's 2123. Midoriya said proudly. What? It took that long for a fan to find me? The Mysterio-shaped hologram proclaimed. Yeah, but, what are you? Midoriya asked. Doing here, I mean. I told you, I'm an artificial intelligence based upon the late Quentin Beck, made just before his rampage in the kaiju machine. My function is to watch over this lair, maintain the equipment via drones and robotic proxies, all until either the world discovers this place or the next Mysterio comes along. Oh, real quick, how did the robot kaiju scheme turn out, by the way? The hologram asked Midoriya. You, all lost. Spider-Man beat you on national TV, Midoriya admitted. Seeing Tsuburaya slump in sadness, Midoriya thought of something that could cheer it up. But the robot's head is in a museum. It's where I found this. Quickly digging through his backpack, Midoriya pulled out the notebook. Mysterio's memoirs. The AI cried out joyously. I knew a fan would find it. But I'm not a fan. Midoriya admitted without thinking. What? But then how'd you get past the security? Only a dedicated fan of Mysterio and cinema classics should have been able to get through. It stuttered in confusion. I used the internet. Midoriya said with a shrug. Ah, god damn it. Mysterio's AI grumbled, crossing his arms in annoyance. I knew Beck should have contacted Beckhart's grandkids. But I did want to talk to ya. Midoriya stated, sitting in an old office chair. Oh, came to learn the secrets of Mysterio to continue the legacy? The Mysterio AI asked, perking up. That kind of, Midoriya began, before launching into a spiel. He explained to the AI construct the world he had activated in. How years after his death, superpowers, or quirks as they came to be known as, became commonplace, even more so than the mutants and their X gene, and how heroism was a paying job. He told him how he wanted with all his heart to be a hero, to save people with a smile on his face, but also how everyone, even his own mother and former best friend, told him he couldn't do to lacking a quirk. But since he was a genius, he thought Mysterio could have some advice for him, since Beck was a quirkless man who had fought heroes with quirks. Tsuburaya held on to each word, but due to his lack of a visible face, Midoriya couldn't really tell what he was thinking. At least, until he spoke up after a minute of quietly studying Midoriya's hero notebook. That nice story. Really builds up the world, with a decent premise for conflict and a relatable protagonist with nice, if simplistic motives. But you forgot to mention something important, boy. Midoriya tilted his head in confusion, which the AI took as its cue to continue. Why should the audience, i.e. me, care about any of that? While what Midoriya stuttered out. You're not a fan of Beck and you don't look interested in being the next Mysterio, so why should I help you with your pipe dream? The AI remarked bluntly. But I want to help people. Midoriya said. Does this world have police officers? Doctors? Firefighters? Why yeah, but. Then go to firefighting school. Unless I see something in this that'll help my function, which I don't, then I don't see why I should help you. With that final statement, Tsuburaya turned away, its back to Midoriya. Oh, before you leave, do you mind hitting the reset switch? It's hidden on the pillar to the left of my original suit. I want to give the next person who finds this place a proper welcome. Maybe they'll be worthy of my service. This wasn't good, not good at all. Midoriya hadn't considered that Mysterio might not want to help him. He was lucky that the AI didn't seem upset that a wannabe hero had found him, but otherwise things looked dire. But this was his only chance to become a hero as great as All Might. Surely there was something he could do to convince the AI. But what? Money wouldn't be of much help since he had so little, and Midoriya wasn't one to blackmail, and he doubted the egocentric construct would be intimidated by a Kai weight. His ego. If you help me, I'll be able to become a hero. Midoriya said. A famous hero. He emphasized. Thought so? Well, if I become the world's only real quirkless hero, then everyone's gonna wanna know the source of my gadgets and powers. Midoriya said quickly, but carefully. Yes, Tsuburaya was looking at him. Seizing his chance, Midoriya went for the real meat of his argument. And, well. I'll have to tell them of the legendary villain who stood toe-to-toe with the great Spider-Man, despite lacking his own powers. The V-villain who inspired a hero will be great, legendary. I mean, Dr. Octopus and the Green Goblin are famous baddies, yeah, but neither of them have any really memorable descendants modeled after them, so people only recall them as relics of the past. Struck with a sudden idea, Midoriya quickly spun another speech. And it'll be like those remakes of old movies. Where once clearly evil villain is now much more complicated, or an anti-hero. Lembe a remake. For a good minute, the AI was silent. Midoriya held his breath in anticipation, not daring to interrupt the AI before him. You're good, kid. Tsuburaya finally spoke up. However, I know exactly what you're trying to do. You're playing on Beck's ego. Trying to tempt me with fame and prestige so I'd hand you my secrets on a silver platter. Midoriya's smile faded to one of fear until the hologram burst out laughing. But that speech. That was truly wonderful. Let me be your remake. How creative. He clapped his hands. It seems you are what I was looking for after all. What? Midoriya asked. Quentin Beck was not an armorer. He was an artist. He used his imagination and creativity to craft magnificent illusions that made Avatar's special effects look like a kiddie's paint program. I was not going to give any old person his equipment. They had to prove themselves to be equally talented and creative. Your notes show you have the brains for this, and your speech, well, it wasn't perfect, but you have that spark of imagination that Beck did. So does that mean? Midoriya asked, his smile slowly returning. Yes, you've convinced me, kid. I'll help you become the next hero inspired by Mysterio. The AI proclaimed while Midoriya let out an excited cheer. And so, the work began. Every weekend, Midoriya would hop on a train to Corellia and would study Mysterio's designs under the AI's tutelage. He would spend hours studying the compounds Mysterio used to form his masks and various gases, and with him, found safer substitutes that didn't risk giving the young boy cancer. Midoriya learned how to disassemble and maintain the Mysterio suit. Though the gauntlets were large for him, young Midoriya was able to eventually, with Tsuburaya's guidance, make a small one that fit his hand. The pride he felt at creating a hologram of All Might would stay with him for years. But it wasn't just latex masks and engineering. As Tsuburaya told the young boy, Mysterio was fond of cinema, so once a month Tsuburaya would do some questionably legal video downloads and show Midoriya the movies that the original Mysterio took inspiration from. Films worked on by Ray Harryhausen, Stan Winston, William Castle, Jim Henson, and plenty more were watched, studied, and memorized. Midoriya took notes on the animation techniques, the methods they used to project scale, and the way they seamlessly blended it with the actors. When asked why he didn't just use CGI, Tsuburaya explained that unless they had a massive budget, a team of computer artists, a portable green screen, and time, realistic CGI couldn't work in a 3D environment due to the uncanny valley effect. Though secretly Midoriya guessed that Mysterio, and thus Tsuburaya, just didn't like CGI, not that he would bring it up. This all went on for 7 years. 7 long years of chemistry, animatronics, and learning English. This last one was so that Midoriya could not only understand more movies in their original language, but so that he could encode his notes better. 7 years of learning acting, basic fighting stances, how to take a hit and keep going, and the importance of prep work. There were some bumps and disagreements, like when Midoriya admitted his reluctance to use hallucinogenic gas on people until Tsuburaya assured him that the gases had no long-lasting side effects once out of the person's system. For 7 years, Tsuburaya would occasionally question if being a hero would really be the best route for Midoriya. Each time the boy reminded him that this was the best route to making Mysterio famous again, which silenced the AI. Though Midoriya knew Tsuburaya still had his doubts. Nevertheless, he directed all his power into helping Midoriya with learning the tools of his trade while also finding a way to obtain funding. In a legal way, at Midoriya's insistence. And every day, for 7 long years, Midoriya would pour his strength and brains into making Mysterio a hero. 7 years of prepping to be the world's first quirkless hero. Which changed the day he met someone. Someone mighty. Midoriya, now 14 years old and excited for the next year, stood in the street among the crowd. The pro-hero Backdraft was using his quirk to create a fence made of water to keep civilians away from a villain with a size-changing quirk. A power line fell, but was deftly caught with a pair of massive arms belonging to the punching hero, Death Arms. All of which, Midoriya took notes on. Glancing up, Midoriya spotted the new hero Kamui Woods do battle against the villain. Midoriya gasped and remembered his newest addition to his intel gathering. Reaching to his lapel, Midoriya pressed a hidden switch on his All Might pin, activating a hidden camera that streamed all the footage back to Tsuburaya. The AI had always stressed the importance of gathering footage for further study. You never know when you might have missed something vital. After all, if Midoriya was going to be a master of disguise and illusions, he needed to study the people he was copying. And Midoriya had been eagerly waiting to see Kamui Wood's special moves. Preemptive binding. Panyon cannon. But he'd have to wait another day, it seemed, for without warning, a shapely young woman as big as a building suddenly appeared over the train tracks and drop-kicked the massive villain in the face. Midoriya blinked in shock, but moved to a new page to sketch the new hero as she introduced herself to the ogling crowd. Today is my debut. Pleased to meet you all. You may call me Mount Lady, and this bum won't bother anyone else. the heroine exclaimed while striking a pose that emphasized her figure. Several lustful civilians and reporters immediately took several pictures, while Kamui Woods complained about the intrusion on his battle, taking the spotlight away from him. Midoriya himself didn't really care about Mount Lady's form and sketched her only to have a reference. Sure, he didn't really need to with all the footage he had, but it was an enjoyable pastime and kept his artistic skills sharp. Finishing up the basics, I can add the details later. Midoriya put away his notebook and clicked off the hidden camera, making his way to Aldera Junior High. Midoriya privately wondered why Japan had so many references to Star Wars. A good series that was still popular to this day, though Tsuburaya disliked the sequel series and later remakes and additions, citing the inclusion of several Darth Fakers as derivative and boring. Midoriya personally thought they were okay, but then again, he wasn't a cinema purist like his AI mentor. School went well, it went. Same classes as always. Math, Japanese, history, writing, art, science and English, the last two were the subjects Midoriya excelled the most at nowadays. Physical ed wasn't too bad. Midoriya had gained some light muscle from sparring with Mysterio's different robots, commanded by Tsuburaya, though he still wasn't in the top of his class. That honor went to Bakugo. No, the real issue was homeroom, near the end of the day. Specifically, when their teacher decided to make an announcement. Now, officially speaking, I need to pass out these career forms so you could write down the job you'd like to have once you're finished here, he began, hefting up a pile of papers, only to toss them into the air a second later. But why bother? It's clear you all want to be heroes. The class cheered in joy, quirks on full display to accompany their shouting. Midoriya, however, stayed silent, focusing instead on his notebook. Within it were sketches of various heroes, their costumes design, and their quirks. Midoriya took special care to note the way they moved, the weight and posture of the person, even the noises they made when moving or using their quirks. Midoriya ignored Bakugo, as usual, proclaiming his superiority over the class as he took notes on Mount Lady. While he doubted the need to disguise himself as the new pro-hero would ever come up, observing the way she moved at giant form would help with selling the realism of some of the larger illusions Tsubaya was helping him develop. Midoriya was focused in his own world, not bothered by his noisy classmates. At least, not until his teacher made what to him was a casual statement, but to Midoriya was the equivalent of cutting open his hand and dangling the bleeding appendage over a shark tank. Oh, Midoriya was also planning on going to UA High, right? Finally stopping, Midoriya looked up, biting his lip. The other students around him snickered, brushing him off and dismissing him like usual. It upset Deku that he was underestimated, but it wasn't anything he wasn't used to. The real problem though was Bakugo, who turned to him with an ugly glare that Midoriya did his best to ignore. Once the bell rang, Midoriya packed his bag as quickly as possible, hoping that if he was just fast enough, he could escape from his ex-friend's anger. No such luck. What the hell do you think you're doing, Deku? Bakugo snarled, slamming his hand on the desk. You know that I'm the only person in this shitty school meant to be someone special. Hachin, Midoriya pleaded, not out of fear, but out of a vague hope that Bakugo would be lenient. Instead, Bakugo grabbed Midoriya's hero notebook and derisively flipped through it. You think your shitty drawings and notes are enough to get you into UA? He sneered, tossing it to his sycophantic minions. Midoriya refused to call the kids who hang out with Bakugo friends. A better word would have been parasites, but Midoriya wasn't that mean. The two collectively leered at his drawings of Mount Lady and Midnight as if it was a dirty magazine. He even wrote the way they walked. What a creep. One of them snorted. Please give it back, Midoriya said calmly, thinking of his latest creation. It was in his backpack. He just had to reach in and slip it on. Then Bakugo would see how he could use his brains to get into UA. But the projector was still in beta. And if the rest of it didn't work, Midoriya would just be mocked, laughed at, and so he pushed those thoughts away. No, Deku, I won't. Bakugo snatched the notebook back from his minions and crossed over to the window, overlooking a small koi pond. Midoriya's eyes widened and he charged forward, but the two sycophants grabbed his arms and held him back. You can't even break free from them, Deku. I doubt even Shiketsu's gene course would accept you. All because you're a shitty pebble for greater people to step on. Before Midoriya's pleading eyes, Bakugo lit the book aflame with his quirk and tossed it down to the pond. No. Midoriya shouted. And I'll remind you of that fact no matter how many times it takes. Bakugo said, turning to the boy with a horrible smile. But don't worry, I know a way you can get a quirk. Jump off the school's roof and pray you'll get one in your next life. With that awful statement, Bakugo finally left with his minions, leaving Midoriya behind to wallow in his cruel words. Midoriya wanted to lash out, he wanted to prove to Kachin he was capable, quirk or no quirk, but he stayed silent. Instead, Midoriya hurried out of the classroom and looped around the building to the pond. Shooing away the nibbling fish, he retrieved his burnt but thankfully still eligible notebook. Thank you, waterproof notebooks. He thought sadly to himself, shaking off the water remnants. Exiting the school, Midoriya went along his usual path home. It wasn't far, so he didn't need to use the train. Midoriya briefly thought of heading to the studio. The named Tsuburaya insisted that Midoriya call the underground lair when out in public. To prevent unworthy thieves and heroes. He would proclaim. Midoriya thought the AI was being paranoid, but complied with his wishes anyway just to be safe. It would be a good place to test Midoriya's prototype, but that day had soured Midoriya's mood, so he chose to head home instead. Besides, the boy reasoned as he moved under an overpass, he wasn't sure it was 100% functional. For all Midoriya knew, it could blow up and leave him with burns on his arm. Showing it off to Tsuburaya only for it to explode was the last thing Midoriya wanted to happen. Once he got home he could test it on the female mannequin arm he dug out of the trash. The look on his mom's face when she found it while cleaning under his bed was a memory he wished he would forget. Speaking of trash, though, what was that awful smell? Behind Midoriya, a manhole cover rattled and a mass of foul-smelling sludge emerged, a pair of eyeballs and a mouth full of sharp teeth suspended within it. In seconds it spotted the now frozen in place Midoriya. Yes. A skinsuit perfect for the taking. The sludge, a villain. Midoriya realized in horror, shouted and shot towards the boy, enveloping him in its form before he could do anything. Thanks kid, you're my hero. The criminal shouted, forcing itself into Midoriya's mouth and nose. Midoriya struggled, reaching for his backpack. His only hope now was his untested gadget. Even if it blew up, maybe it would take out the villain. But the sludge was thick, viscous, more akin to tar than slime, and the fact he couldn't breathe didn't help either. His hand struggled against the backpack, even as his vision began to blur. But then, the manhole was rocketed into the air. Have no fear. Why? The slime villain and Midoriya looked back to the now exposed sewer entrance, one in fear, the other in hope. Standing before them, carrying a bag of groceries, was a mountain of a man. He had no hero costume on, only green cargo pants and a white t-shirt that threatened to come apart at the seams, barely able to contain the man's roaring muscles. But neither of them needed the man's costume to know who this man was. Everything from the smile to the distinctive V-shaped haircut told them that this was the man, no, the legend. He was admired like no other, considered the #1 hero by the entire world. A renowned symbol of peace with few who could dare hope to match the strength, charisma, and hope he radiated. A legend whose fights were almost always over in a near instant, a legend who saved people from natural disasters, villain attacks, and hostage situations with 99% success. A legend whose smile meant safety to the boy and inevitable defeat to the villain. A man the masses knew as none other than All Might. Because I am here. No, no. The villain squirmed even as the hero raised his fist. He was no less than 10 meters away from the villain, so his fist couldn't connect with the slime. Not that it needed to. Texas may I ash. As a roar of thunder shook the street, Midoriya's world went to black. When Midoriya woke back up, it was from a man smacking his cheek. Hey kid, wake up. Midoriya's eyes shot open and he sat up. It wasn't just some random passerby waking him up, it was his idol, All Might. All Might. Ugusha savid mefram thislemeveling betuthapenita Midoriya spat out without pausing for breath. Haha. You've got quite the lungs on ya, kid. But have no fear. I've got him safely sealed away. All Might held up a 2-liter bottle of soda, now filled with the slime villain's material, eyes, and teeth. Midoriya scrambled for his backpack and pulled out his notebook, only to find a previously blank page filled with a massive signature. Amigashio read signated. Midoriya's quick ramblings amused the hero, who laughed heartily as he wiped the corner of his mouth. I'd love to stick around and chat, young Midoriya, Amigashio knows me name. But I've got to take this baddie to the local police station. Farewell. The man pocketed the villain's bottle in his pants pocket and prepared to leap, not seeing Midoriya scramble over to him. Wait, I still have questions. Looking down, All Might flinched in shock, seeing the boy clinging to his pants leg and screaming. Kid, I love my fans, but this is a bit close for comfort, please let go of me. He shook his leg, which only made Midoriya scream even more and cling to his leg tighter. But if I let go I'll fall and die. Oh, right. All Might ceased his leg shaking and looked around, spotting a building with roof access that he could land upon. With a destination in mind, he landed with a quiet grunt while Midoriya let go, shaking in fear and exhilaration from the ride. Seeing the man turn away from him brought him out of the state, though. All Might, wait. I have a question for you. Sorry, but I have to leave now. Don't worry, if you knock on the door long enough, someone will come by and let you in. The pro hero turned and stepped towards the rooftop's edge, trying to hide how desperate he was to leave. Can I be a hero even without a quirk? All Might froze. His face held his usual smile, but now there was a weight to it and his words as he turned to the boy looking at him with hope. Without a quirk. Yes, sir. Midoriya responded. He was so overjoyed at having his idol's attention, he blocked out the rest of the world. All my life, people have doubted me. They told me I couldn't be a hero. But if the pre-quirk heroes could do it, why couldn't I? So I've pushed myself, studying harder than ever. I've even gone under another man's tutelage to build gadgets and gizmos that I know can put me on par with heroes, but people still doubt me. But I know that I can be a great hero who saves people with a smile on their face, just like you. Midoriya finally looked up, hoping to see his idol smile and give him a thumbs up, maybe even a word of encouragement. But instead got something that shocked him to his core. Instead of a massive muscular powerhouse he had been expecting, standing before him was the exact opposite. He wore the same clothes All Might had been wearing, but they were far too large for the thin, sickly-looking man with gaunt blue eyes and disheveled blonde hair with two parts that fell past his face, hunched over in the cloud of steam that seemed to pour out from his form. The skeletal man held no smile, just an annoyed and slightly sad frown as his blue eyes observed Midoriya. Who did not take the sight too well. Why? Who are you? What happened to All Might? Are you one of Tsuburaya's tests? Midoriya screamed, looking around for All Might or maybe a hologram projector. Calm down, kid. I am All Might Blarf. The man proclaimed, only to vomit a mouthful of blood that served only to freak Midoriya out more. The skeletal man sighed, annoyed more at the circumstances than the boy himself. Look, you know how guys at the pool are constantly sucking in their gut and flexing to look tougher than they really are. It's like that. Boo, but you can't be. All Might is a mountain of a man with muscles and a fearless smile. Midoriya rambled, while the emaciated man sighed in exasperation. Trust me, kid, there's plenty of fear behind that smile. The man said, sliding down the roof's railing to a sitting position. Listen, since you already discovered my secret, I'm going to show you something, so I'm trusting that you're not going to blab about this online. The man lifted up the left side of his shirt and Midoriya gasped in horror, hands covering his mouth. Upon the man was a massive scar, purple and sick, that covered almost half the left side of his torso, with the worst of it centered on his stomach. The fact that it didn't look fresh was only a small comfort to the boy. Pretty nasty, right? I got this in a bad fight about 5 years ago. I lost my stomach and part of my lung. The surgeries and therapy needed to recover from the fight messed me up badly and nowadays, I can only be a hero for about 3 hours. The rest of the time, this is me. Midoriya stared at the man. Working with Tsuburaya, Midoriya learned how to read people. He could tell when they were happy, sad, angry, or lying. This was to help him with learning how to imitate people and mimic them better. And every lesson he learned was telling him the same, horrible truth. The man before him, against all possibility and logic, was All Might. Biting his lip, Midoriya drew upon his extensive knowledge of All Might to ask his next question, mainly to keep his mind off the world-shattering truth he had just witnessed. 5 years ago was that the fight with Toxic Chainsaw? You really know your stuff, kid. All Might said in surprise. But no. That punk got a few good hits in, yeah, but he didn't do this. The fight that led to this was never made public, at my request. I mean, I'm the guy who's always smiling, right? All Might shut his eyes, steeling himself for the next part of his speech. The truth is I smile, not just to assure everyone else but to fool the fear within everyone, even me. If people saw this. Saw what being a hero could do to the symbol of peace, someone believed to be impossible to hurt. He sighed, before looking at Midoriya apologetically. You wanted to know if a quirkless kid could be a hero, like in the pre-quirk era. I'm sorry, but in my honest opinion, kid. He took a breath and reluctantly continued. I don't think you can. Midoriya froze. He didn't believe it. He couldn't believe it. All Might, the man who coined the phrase go beyond. Plus ultra. That became UA High's motto, didn't think he could do it. Gadgets or not, kid. This job is dangerous. All Might said sadly as he stood up. Maybe in the past, when villains weren't as dangerous or common, or also relied on technology, but not these days. All the equipment in the world isn't enough to handle some of the worst villains alive. That's not to say you can't do good. Plenty of heroes need support equipment, or you could be a police officer. It's not glamorous, I know, but it's still helping people. Reaching the door to the rooftop access, the man turned one last time to the boy. It's important to have dreams, kid, but they have to be realistic. I'm sorry. With that, the man, the idol to Midoriya, left through the roof access, hating himself for telling the boy something so heartbreaking. But if it spared him from what he had to go through 5 years ago, then it had to be said. Right? The words, though clearly meant to be encouraging, had the opposite effect on the boy. Midoriya felt as though each counter-argument and alternative was a smack to the face. A participation trophy for the person in last place. Confirmation that Midoriya was never going to fulfill his dreams. Midoriya sat on the rooftop, wanting nothing more to cry, frustration welling up in him. His mother, his best friend, and now his idol, said he was chasing a dream. Even Tsuburaya had expressed doubt on him being a hero and tried to suggest he'd have better luck being a villain. Maybe. Midoriya would have continued wallowing in his misery, but a nearby explosion quickly put a stop to that. Midoriya's head shot up. It wasn't far, and right now Midoriya needed a distraction, more than ever. Flinging his backpack on, he ran down the roof access. There was already a crowd of civilians around when Midoriya arrived. The pro-heroes Death Arms, Kamui Woods, and Backdraft were already there, but weren't fighting whatever villain had appeared. The first two were more focused on keeping the crowd back, while Backdraft was containing the flames that consumed the surrounding buildings. Mount Lady appeared, but stayed back, unable to enter the confined space, it seemed. Midoriya clicked on his camera pin, but couldn't get a good view of what was happening. "What's going on?" Midoriya asked a passerby, a young teen with 3 fox tails. "Some kind of slime villain. He's holding a schoolboy hostage." He responded before turning back towards the scene. "A slime villain?" Midoriya asked in horror. He quickly shoved his way to the front of the crowd, where his worst fear was confirmed. It was the same villain from under the bridge, only now it had someone struggling within its folds. Who it was, Midoriya couldn't see. But how did it get out? All Might had it captured. Unless. Midoriya's eyes scanned the ground, and sure enough, there was the soda bottle All Might had imprisoned the villain in, the cap knocked loose only a meter away. "It must have fallen out while I was hanging onto his leg, that means this is my fault. Why isn't anyone doing anything?" A bystander shouted in worry. More voices joined in, from civilians and pro-heroes alike. "He has a kid hostage. Damn it, my quirk isn't compatible here. The fire is getting out of control. I can't help, the space is too narrow for me to safely enter. Where's All Might?" All around Midoriya, voices from onlookers, pro-heroes, and firefighters mixed and mingled together, a chorus of blame that Midoriya was forced to listen to. A disaster he caused, and a cursing, exploding schoolboy who. "Wait, exploding? Get off of me, you shitty villain." Bakugo snarled through a mouthful of muck, his explosions useless against the villain's malleable body. All his attacks did was set the surrounding on fire, worsening the already dire situation. Seeing Bakugo, Midoriya's personal symbol of victory struggling, looking around in angry desperation, had an immediate effect upon the green-haired child. In a blur, Midoriya shot past a barricade, reaching into his backpack. "Kid. What are you doing? Stop." The shouts did nothing to slow Midoriya down, who dug through his pack and slipped on a pair of bulky-looking sunglasses lined with circuits, tiny cameras, and wires. From the sidelines, All Might, thin and weak, watched, horrified. He was unable to do anything now that his limit had passed, and because of it a young boy who he told earlier today couldn't be a hero was going to die trying. The shouts drew the slime villain's attention, who upon seeing Midoriya, recognized him and snarled. "You again." The villain lashed out a tentacle, but to everyone's shock, Midoriya dodged with barely a flinch. Tsuburaya's animatronic Spider-Man was quicker. Midoriya thought as he kept digging through his bag. Dodging the villain's next tentacle, and finally retrieving the last of what he wanted, Midoriya used the momentum of the dodge to fling the backpack into the villain's face. The pack was too light to do any real damage, and even though a few pencils managed to hit the eyes, it was a momentary distraction at best. Fortunately, that moment was all Midoriya needed. Midoriya slipped on a beat-up leather gardening glove, attached to which via Velcro and plastic ties was an old smartphone, a tiny projector, a palm-mounted emitter, and a long plastic tube connected to a small metal tank of fluid. Pressing a switch, the prototype Mysterio gauntlet sprayed a cloud of fog that lingered just above his height. Midoriya didn't bother with a hologram, since the smoke and ash would have made it an obvious fake, but even without it, the fog was thick enough on its own to fill the alleyway and hide him. "What the hell? Where are you, brat?" The sludge villain swung its limbs through the smoke, unable to see the boy. Midoriya, unhindered thanks to his prototype sonar, quickly made his way to Bakugo, who was glaring at him despite everything happening. Pressing a few key spots on the smartphone, a thin but hot laser shot out from the palm of the glove, burning away the thickened parts of the villain enough for Midoriya to pull Bakugo free. "What the shit, Deku?" Bakugo managed to choke out. "I saw you and I just had to move to help you." Midoriya shot back, blasting away the last of the slime holding onto Bakugo. "I didn't need you." Bakugo snarled, coughing up the slime still in his mouth. "Achin, for once in your life shut up." Midoriya snapped, grabbing his ex-friend's arm as he ran through the dissipating fog. "I'm not going to let you be smothered by this blob wannabe, not when you need help." "There you are." The villain snarled, whipping out a tentacle that Midoriya, without even looking, dodged. Bakugo was not so lucky and fell, the slimy limb latching onto his leg to drag him back. Midoriya stopped, turned around and grabbed his arm. "Give up, kid. I found a better skin suit than you, and if you run I might actually spare you. No. Midoriya shouted, firing his prototype's lasers. They burned away all approaching tentacles, but Midoriya saw, thanks to his glasses, that it was quickly losing power and intensity. I won't let anyone die, not even you, Kachin. If I have the power to do something, then I will, no matter what. The last laser shot out, barely scorching the slime villain's skin now, but still Midoriya stood his ground as they came for him, raising the smoke storage tank as his only means to protect Bakugo. Only for nothing to hit them but a familiar rush of wind. I truly am a fool. Midoriya's mouth fell open in shock. There before them was All Might, muscular and gritting his teeth as he grabbed hold of the villain's appendages in one massive hand, even as blood trickled from his mouth. I spouted off words to you, but didn't put what I said into practice. With a mighty pull, the slime appendages were ripped away. I forgot the most important lesson of all heroes. To push against the odds and save everyone, even when the odds say otherwise. Midoriya stared in shock, dropping the tank. Behind him, Bakugo stared in wonder, matching Midoriya's expression for the first time in years. The hero must fight to save everyone, even when his own life is in danger. Now let a pro hero end this disaster. The villain didn't even have time to beg for mercy when All Might reared back his fist. The true it's my Ash. The punch that followed was unlike any other anyone in the crowd had seen in person. It obliterated the slime villain, turning him into little more than chunks of goo along the alley walls and the buildings behind it. The bystanders were kept from joining the villain thanks to Mount Lady blocking the wind with her own arms. For a full minute, a whirlwind of pure power, towering over all the buildings in the area, whipped around the boys and hero, sucking out the oxygen that fueled the nearby flames, only to vanish as suddenly as it began. Bystanders, pro-heroes, schoolboys, and civil workers alike were silent, the only sound being All Might, steam flowing from his form, his breath panting from exertion. He took this opportunity to quickly wipe away the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but that was the only movement anyone did. The silence continued even as the sky around them darkened and a drop of water landed. Then another, and several more. The once clear sky now poured rain as people slowly realized the implications. All Might had changed the weather. But the single punch. Like a dam breaking, that realization led to a mighty roar of cheers from civilians, while the pro-heroes and civil workers began the arduous task of gathering up the villain's remains and putting out whatever small fires remained. All Might smiled at the crowd and raised his fist to the sky, even as he nearly stumbled over. A crowd of reporters ran over, eagerly demanding statements and quotes. As for the two schoolboys who found themselves in the middle of the scene. Bakugo was praised for his bravery and powerful quirk. Despite that he stayed silent, even as he was inspected by some paramedics for any issues. Only a few minutes later, Bakugo was released, with the pro-heroes offering internships once he made it to a hero school. Throughout it all, an unreadable expression was on his face. And what did Midoriya get? What were you thinking, young man? You could have gotten yourself or that boy killed. Did you even get a license for that thing? You're lucky you didn't use a quirk or you'd have been arrested for vigilantism. Yeah, Midoriya wasn't given much else besides a stern warning from the cops and pro-heroes, not that Midoriya really cared. He was more focused on the gauntlet, now being taken away by the police as evidence of his meddling. Although annoyed that he couldn't take it apart to find out why the power was drained so fast, Midoriya stayed silent. He had the blueprints at home, he could rebuild it and find out later. Eventually he was let go after promising to never do that again, and Midoriya made his way home through an empty and quiet residential district. He knew Tsuburaya would have been watching the news, it was how he spent his free time these days, so he was expecting a phone call any minute now, probably to berate him for doing something so dumb or ask him about the first gauntlet prototype Midoriya had made without his guidance. And if he didn't, his mother certainly would call him, her words probably filled mostly with tears of relief and worry. Surprisingly, neither of them were the first people to contact him. Deku? Midoriya spun around, seeing Bakugo running over to him. Some small part of Midoriya hoped that this would be the moment where Bakugo would finally acknowledge his capabilities, but the rest of him, more realist, knew that it was as unlikely as Midoriya being bitten by a radioactive arachnid. Hakachin. Midoriya stuttered out. Are you okay, do you need me too? Where do you get off thinking I needed your help, huh? The explosive boy interrupted, his hands popping. I didn't need you, or that shitty fake Iron Man glove you used. And guess what, it did nothing to help. You did nothing to help. You just got in the way, you shitty Deku. What? Midoriya stuttered, as the other schoolboy stood only a meter away. I didn't need you or your crappy junk, you hear me? He snarled. I could have gotten myself free if you hadn't interrupted. I'll never need you or your shitty support items, don't you ever forget that. With that, the angry boy stormed off down the street, hands in his pockets. Midoriya stared after him for a good minute or two, before eventually deciding it wasn't worth dwelling over anymore. He was right, though the gauntlet wasn't useful for very long. I'll have to look into finding out the power issue. Maybe Tsuburaya can recommend something. Midoriya gave himself a small smile at the thought and turned around to continue on, only to be interrupted yet again. I am here. Walking down the street like a normal person. Ah. All Might. Midoriya yelped, having not expected to encounter All Might yet again. What are you doing here? What happened to the reporters? Ahaha, losing the media is no problem whatsoever. Why? Because I am All Blyerf. All Might quickly turned back into his weaker form, vomiting up blood much to Midoriya's horror. Oh my gosh, you need to get to the hospital. It's okay. It just happened, Samedi bleh. All Might's assurance was interrupted by another cough of blood, which only horrified Midoriya further, to All Might's annoyance. Kid, seriously? I'm okay. This just happens when I push myself too much. Boo, but then shouldn't you be resting? Midoriya asked nervously. The man wiped away the last of the blood, then turned to the schoolboy. I will, but not yet. I needed to see you again, young man. Midoriya looked at him, surprised. But. Why? All Might straightened his posture and stuck up 3 fingers. I came here for 3 reasons. Firstly, to apologize. Earlier, I told you that you couldn't be a quirkless hero, all because I had undergone a bad experience. Whatever I had been through in my life should not have been an excuse to shoot down your dreams. But I did do that, and because of it I became a hypocrite. But it was thanks to me the slime villain got out and I got in the way of your work to bother you. Midoriya muttered, looking down in shame. And the second reason I came here was to thank you. Midoriya's head shot up fast. Thank me? Midoriya whispered out in shock. Earlier today, you told me how everyone else would underestimate your abilities and skill and that no one else believed in you. But while everyone else was too scared or occupied to do anything, you ran ahead, armed with little more than homemade gadgets and sheer determination. All Might proclaimed. Your actions reminded me that heroes aren't born from power, but from heart and drive. Had we not met earlier, I would not have realized what was staring at everyone in the face. What I saw inspired me to act, to push myself to save you. Where others saw foolishness or stupidity, I saw a spark. The man exclaimed. A spark? Midoriya asked, eyes slowly widening with cautious hope. Yes, a spark that made your legs move without thought, that gave you a drive to save that young boy. Nearly every great hero has a similar story, of their legs moving without thought, without regard to the consequences, only that someone needed help. Midoriya's head fell, tears in his eyes. His world was blocked out, as the memory of moving without thought, only instinct, came to him. I thought so, All Might said softly, a small smile gracing his gaunt features. Midoriya could only nod in response, so All Might continued. And now for my final reason, to make a declaration. All Might aimed a frail thin hand to the shaking boy before him. Young man, whether or not you use gadgets, you too can be a hero. Midoriya fell to his knees, tears overtaking his vision. At long last, he heard it. Someone truly believed in him, 100%. Someone told him with no more doubt that he was able to be a hero, to fulfill his dreams. All Might wasn't finished, however. That day, All Might had made 2 different shocks to the Viridian-haired boy. The first had been the reveal of his true form and that his power was declining. The second was his belief that Midoriya was unable to be a hero. Learning these 2 things had shaken Midoriya, but he thought that he was done having his world rocked. He was wrong, for All Might had one more perception-shattering bomb to drop. Throwing his arms open as if to embrace the heavens, All Might proclaimed, I deem you worthy of my power. My quirk is yours to inherit. Midoriya stared at the pro-hero in shock, unsure of how to respond. Your quirk? Yes, please tell. Midoriya and All Might jumped, the latter looking around in shock and fear. What who said? Steam poured from his muscles, but he didn't inflate any larger. Don't bother trying to shift to your muscle form, I already saw it. That's when Midoriya realized 2 things. The first was that he had left his ringer off on his phone, through which Tsuburaya was now speaking. The other was that he had forgotten to shut his pin camera off once the slime villain was defeated. Who is that? All Might asked, fearful of the secret onlooker. That's Tsuburaya, my mentor, I guess you could say. Midoriya admitted, pulling out his phone to show the hero the call taking place. I'm so sorry, he must have called me when we were talking. If you're worried about me spilling your secrets, don't be. I'm incapable of it. Tsuburaya muttered, annoyed at the sidetracking. All Might narrowed his eyes. And why not? Midoriya hesitated. I serve you, Mantle Bearer. I follow your script and yours alone. The AI reminded him. He's an AI I inherited, I guess you could say. Midoriya admitted. He's programmed to listen to me and obey my orders, so he won't reveal any of this conversation to anyone. You have an AI? All Might was shocked. AIs weren't commonplace. Creating one was strictly regulated and allowed to be done only by specific support companies, and said AI's capabilities were limited to prevent one from following in the footsteps of the omnicidal robot Ultron. To this day, only a few heroic ones, such as Jim Hammond, Vision, or Cerebro were still active, the first two teaching at Avengers Academy, the latter at the Xavier School for Gifted Youths, while others could be found maintaining Island or guarding imprisoned villains with quirks that would affect organic people. For a boy like Midoriya to possess one, fully sentient with a personality, yet obedient to him, was nothing short of astounding. Yes, but you're getting off track. You were saying something about giving Midoriya your quirk? Tsuburaya asked. Straightening up, All Might coughed. Right, I suppose you have a right to know as well, being Midoriya's mentor. I should make it clear that I'm not going to force anything onto Midoriya. If he chooses to accept or decline, then I'll respect his decision, but I think he's worthy of my quirk. All Might dramatically pointed his finger to the boy, shouting, so do you want to accept my awesome power or not? Midoriya only stared at the man before him, so Tsuburaya decided to make a suggestion. Perhaps you should explain what exactly you're talking about. Oh, that's probably a good idea. All Might admitted. He cleared his throat and began his speech. Journalists always guess about the nature of my quirk, usually claiming it to be super strength or some kind of invulnerability. That is correct. In interviews you would make a joke and dodge the question. Tsuburaya noted. But I take it that isn't the truth. No, it isn't. I've never revealed the truth of my quirk, for the world must believe that its greatest hero came about through natural means, like anyone else. But I'm not. You're not? Midoriya asked, hanging on to every word, his mind racing. No, I'm not. All Might confirmed. My power did not come about naturally. I wasn't born bearing this power, but given it. It is a sacred torch passed down to me from someone else. It was given to you. Midoriya was in shock. For the fourth time today his worldview had come crashing down. That's impossible. But it is. And I can give you my power, for I believe you are worthy of inheriting it. Hold on, this is a lot to process, Midoriya began, before throwing open the floodgates with a long stream of words, detailing how the internet and world at large had constantly theorized about All Might's power. Wow, it was considered one of the great wonders of the modern world. Why such a thing had been unheard of, since power was meant to be unique to each individual, and no one else before then was able to just give powers to another individual in such a way, and such a quirk would have been seen as world-changing were it to become public knowledge. Such a thing would have changed the way quirks or other powers were viewed, maybe even the nature of powers itself. Geez, kid, quit overanalyzing this. All Might interrupted, Midoriya snapping out of his tangent. Sorry, Midoriya does that sometimes. Usually it takes a sharp poke to snap him out of it. Tsuburaya commented. Despite his humorous tone, though, the AI was also analyzing everything he knew. Having Quentin Beck's memories, he had seen plenty of types of powers. Super geniuses, men who could break worlds, the supernatural, magic, men capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of existence, aliens that could mimic the powers of others, just to name a few, but transferring one's power. No such ability had ever existed to his knowledge. The closest thing, in Tsuburaya's memory banks, had been the X-Men member Rogue, who could siphon away one's vitality and powers. But from what data he had, Rouge couldn't retain the powers without killing someone, and as far as Beck knew, she had not been able to give that power to anyone else. Focusing back on the scene before him, Tsuburaya watched All Might thrust out his arm, a firm glare focused upon the boy in front of him. You'll have to adjust your reality and accept this new truth. I can transfer my power to another person, and that's just one aspect of its powers. He clenched his fist, then opened it, and from within the palm a bright light surged, brighter than the sun, but with the strength of a bomb, yet it did not hurt any of them. The true name of my quirk is One for All. One for All. Midoriya repeated. Though it was a simple phrase, it felt like he was learning the true meaning of existence, or like when he found that map which led him to the path of being a hero, quirkless or not. Now, a new path had come before him, one he didn't ever dream was possible. Yes, my boy. All Might proclaimed to the boy and AI. One quirk, improved by one person, then passed down from generation to generation, with each new wielder adding their own power to make it stronger than the one before. This cultivated power is what has allowed me to save thousands of lives and stop those who would do them harm. The truth behind my strength. But why would you choose me to give me a gift like that? What if I can't live up to it? Midoriya asked. I've been on a long search for a worthy successor, but then, I watched you jump into action without hesitation to save that boy, even while others stood idly by. All Might looked down at the boy. You may be a quirkless fanboy with homemade gadgets, but you tried to save him anyways. You acted like a hero. Midoriya could feel himself tear up again. To hear All Might reaffirm his belief in him, despite all the trouble that day, meant so much to him that he just couldn't help himself. All Might chuckled at the sight. Seriously kid, you've gotta stop crying so much if you want this quirk. All Might said, but looked at him with a smile, certain the boy would immediately respond. If I may interject. Midoriya looked at Tsuburaya. What's wrong? I feel the need to remind you of the theme of your gadgets and support items. Tsuburaya said, subtly gesturing towards the muscle-bound hero. Midoriya understood. He trusted All Might, but he knew that some people would be reluctant to trust anyone associated with villains. What's wrong? All Might asked, confused at the AI's interruption, while Midoriya felt a growing sense of dread as he thought about what Tsuburaya was saying. The inheritance from which Midoriya obtained me came with the condition that Midoriya would honor the legacy of the man who created me. That man wasn't a super strong one, so he relied on gadgets and technology to keep up with super-powered peers. I see you think that if Midoriya gains my quirk that voids his inheritance. All Might asked. Why do you think that? If Midoriya were to suddenly gain a quirk, then he'd no longer require the gadgets that I helped him develop. He needs to use the equipment as part of his persona or else he forfeits his inheritance and thus the resources at his disposal. My creator was very specific about that part. Tsuburaya explained solemnly. Wait, is that true? Midoriya asked. Quirk or no quirk, Midoriya had worked hard with Tsuburaya for years. He wasn't going to throw it all away just because he had a quirk, he had made a promise. But if Tsuburaya thought that this violated the agreement. Oh, there's no problem, then. What do you mean? Tsuburaya asked. Midoriya looked at All Might, confused. As it stands, Midoriya can't use my quirk as he is now. All Might began, only for Midoriya to interrupt tearfully. But you said I was worthy. Geez kid, calm down, I was talking about your body. All Might explained. That quieted Midoriya, so All Might continued. My quirk holds the power of 7 other people in it, 8 once you take it. The combined strength of all that power swimming around could ravage an unprepared body. Imagine a single party balloon trying to hold an entire tank of helium or your limbs shooting off like rockets. Midoriya promptly did and screamed in horror. Seriously? Horrifying, but how is that relevant? Tsuburaya asked. All Might didn't like how dismissive the AI was towards the idea of Midoriya exploding, but continued. To safely contain my power, you're going to have to build up your body's muscles to a certain point, but even then you'd have so much power that you probably won't be able to safely control it at first. A single punch would probably shatter your arm from the backlash alone. Swallowing down the bile that came from that mental image, Midoriya quickly latched onto what All Might was suggesting. I get it. Until I can learn to safely use my power, I'll have to rely on gadgets to supplement my combat and rescue missions, and the illusions could help me get into the right position to use my power. And even if my limbs are damaged, I could use the gadgets as cover to escape. Precisely. All Might said. Plenty of pro heroes use support items to help them out with any problems their quirks might have. Also, it would be better if you don't model yourself too much after me. Seeing their confused looks, All Might suddenly froze. He nearly let something important slip. So thinking quickly, he explained part of his reasoning, stumbling over his words a bit. It's just that if Somio people notice your power is like mine, they'll start questioning why that is and might look into it, and if word gets out that the world's strongest quirk can be given away. Chaos and villains scrambling for that quirk. Midoriya realized with a shudder. The reasoning is sound. Tsuburaya spoke up after a minute of silence. The gadgets and suit will act as support, your power used for direct combat, and the costume will distract people from questioning the source of his new quirk. I find this to be a beneficial arrangement and within the parameters my creator set and thus acceptable. Perfect. So with that all taken care of, All Might turned to Midoriya. Do you accept this power as your own? Midoriya stood up, a smile on his face. I do. I'll use your power and that of Mysterio's to become a hero. No reluctance. I knew you would be like that, fanboy. Wait, did you say Mysterio? All Might asked. Midoriya froze up again, while Tsuburaya just sighed in exasperation. So, yeah, Midoriya admitting that the source of his inheritance was a pre-quirk era villain was probably not the best way to gain All Might's trust. That's why, to show All Might that he wasn't going to be a villain, Midoriya offered to take him to the studio the next day so he could see what Midoriya was working on. He would have taken him there that night, but the sun was already setting and Inko Midoriya had waited for her son long enough. So the boy and All Might exchanged numbers, the latter revealing his real name as Yagi Toshinori, and parted ways for the night. The next day saw Midoriya waiting outside the DVD store, hands in his pockets. As he had expected, his mom had been worried out of her mind and it took 10 minutes of apologies and promises to never be so reckless again before she calmed down enough to let him out of her sight. She asked why he hadn't come home yet, which led to Midoriya having to tell a white lie that the police had kept him longer than expected. Midoriya had another chance to tell his mom about Suburaya, about the studio, about the source of his amazing gadgets, but he couldn't. It wasn't brought up often, but Japan wasn't friendly to families related to supervillains. Midoriya had remembered this one kid in his class some years before, Maro, who had been popular with his classmates, especially Bakugo because of his own powerful quirk, until a rumor started that his uncle had been a villain. The rumor had spread like wildfire, and within a month the boy's popularity plummeted, his friends had ditched him, no one wanted him at their table during lunch. Bakugo had openly called him out on it in public, which only made things worse for the boy. Eventually things got so bad that he had to be transferred to another school. The worst part was that Midoriya was certain that the rumor was false, or a mistake, but that didn't change how others had treated Maro. Midoriya loved his mother, but even she had warned Midoriya to keep his distance from Maro, even though Midoriya was certain that he wasn't a villain, even if his uncle had been. So every time he thought of telling her the source of his gadgets, he couldn't help but see his mom, begging him for it to not be true. Once, he had a nightmare that she kicked him out onto the street when she had discovered it. He knew his mom loved him, but that didn't change his fears. Hopefully if things turned out well with All Might, Midoriya could finally muster up the courage. "You've got that look on your face again, Midoriya-kun." Midoriya looked up, a small smile on his face. The old woman, the same one from years ago, was there again, dressed in her yellow kimono and calmly eating a bento bun while wrapped in a thick blanket, a worn duffel bag behind her. "Hello, Miss Yoshida-san. Are the blankets warm enough? The weather's been getting colder in this area." Midoriya asked kindly. Once Midoriya had become a regular to the area, the people there had warmed up to him, especially since he began bringing them old clothes and the occasional bit of non-pack-a-god food and toiletries, though only if they requested it. Midoriya would have done more, but they all assured him they could take care of themselves. "Oh yes, they'll work quite well," she said, but her expression shifted to a more serious one. "But don't change the subject." "Sorry ma'am." Midoriya apologized. "I was just thinking about telling my mom about." Well, he looked back at the DVD store. As far as Midoriya knew, none of the bureaucramen in the area knew what was inside. Suburaya had assured him that he'd have known if anyone unauthorized had gone inside. "Your little workshop, yes?" she asked, a small smile on her face. "Why yeah," Midoriya admitted. "It's just I don't know if she'd approve of what I keep in there, and she worries about me constantly. I don't want her to think that I'm some kind of delinquent." Miss Yoshida asked, Midoriya nodding. "I think you're overthinking this. Perhaps she'll be upset with whatever you show her, but chances are she'll be happy knowing that you do have a plan to become a hero, but I think the best way to expose her to this is to ease her into it. Start small, perhaps show her that friend you mentioned, Suburaya, Abasan." Midoriya tentatively corrected. The woman was kind, but something told him that she was one you should show respect to at all times. Maybe it was her rambling stories of being a Yakuza princess, or just the wild look she'd get when excited, but no matter what, she was one you didn't ignore or insult. Not unless you wanted trouble. "But maybe you're right." "I'm always right, Greenie," she exclaimed with a cocky smirk. Their conversation would have continued, but at that point Toshinori Yagi, wearing similar clothes as the previous day, had appeared. Before he could say anything, Miss Yoshida spoke up. "If you're looking for a Kagawash Plus, he's the next street down in the alley by the adult store." "Excuse me?" Toshinori asked, confused. "Oh, no, Mr. Yagi's here to, evaluate my workspace." Midoriya rapidly explained, hoping that his idol wouldn't be insulted once he realized what the old woman had insinuated. "Oh, I see. My apologies," Miss Yoshida said, her mood now cheerful. "Carry on." She turned back to her lunch, happily tuning out the world. "Sorry about her." Miss Yoshida has a bunch of crazy ideas in her head. Midoriya quietly apologized, leading the pro-hero around to the back of the store. "It's fine, but why are we here, exactly?" Yagi asked the green-haired boy. Midoriya didn't respond straight away, instead pressing his hand to the hidden panel's handprint scanner, installed only the previous year. With a quick flash, the door opened up. Midoriya wiped the panel clean with his sleeve and stepped inside. "You didn't think someone like Suburaya's creator would be glaringly obvious, right?" Midoriya asked, holding open the door. In the years since accessing the building room, Midoriya had slowly converted the backroom and office into a sort of private recreation and relaxation room. His hope was to eventually turn the whole place into a proper hero agency one day, hopefully boost the local economy, but for now he was content with a simple private hideaway. "Even his reputation kind of," Yagi admitted as he stepped in, shutting the door behind him, the door automatically locking itself. "Wait until you see the studio," Midoriya said with a smirk, going to the shelf of DVDs. Pulling down Get Smart opened up the door to the secret staircase. Midoriya smiled at All Might's dumbfounded expression. "I know, cliché, but it has a charm to it." Yagi chuckled and followed him downstairs. Reaching the door, Midoriya answered the 3 questions and finally entered the studio. Yagi stepped in, his sunken eyes wide in amazement. The studio hadn't changed very much over the years. Aside from there being less dust and tarps, the biggest differences were the workbench and art station. Adorning the former were blueprints for Mysterio's suits, schematics for his gauntlets, and various chemical formulas to improve upon the gases and latex substances Midoriya would one day be using. Upon the latter were sketches and notes. Each one depicting either a pro hero or some kind of fantastical monster to be used in an illusion. Notes about the minute details of each hero surrounded the drawings. Materials, movement, quirk and support item observations, even their posture and personality. Close by, crumbled up wads of paper in a small trash can were overflowing onto the floor, likely from scrapped ideas or rejected monsters. Off to the side, near an express elevator, were a few crates, each one bearing a vaguely familiar logo of a stylized W, M, and H with a circle and diamond in the center. Said crates being loaded onto the service elevator by robotic copies of Fourthkind, Colossus, and Endeavor. Yagi blinked, but continued on. Not far from the strange sight was a table, with hologram emitters projecting an office building, with people in either gray, blue, yellow, or red, with a single green figure on the bottom. What is all this? Yagi asked, picking up a model of Gigan sitting upon a model cityscape. Methods for which Midoriya shall be an illusion hero. Tsuburaya said, a hologram depicting an older man in a brown suit with a silver goatee and mustache appearing in a teleporting in effect Midoriya was pretty sure came from the original Star Trek. Since being a tech-based illusionist is not as simple as snapping one's fingers, Midoriya has to study the locations he'll potentially be stopping crime at and plan out the show, you could say. Yagi blinked at the AI, surprised at the appearance of the hologram. So, you're Tsuburaya? In the holographic flesh. Tsuburaya confirmed with a flamboyant bow. You're quite lucky actually. You're the first person aside from the locals and Midoriya to see me in my Dr. Ludwig Reinhardt avatar. You have more than one form? Why? Yagi asked, a hint of cautious suspicion directed at the AI. We thought that an avatar of Mysterio would send people the wrong impression once we went public. Tsuburaya explained. Noting that Yagi had not relaxed all that much, he continued. Rest assured, I mean neither you or Midoriya any harm. He discovered this lair and has what Quentin Beck was looking for in a successor and thus is entitled to everything here, including Beck's fortune, investments, and financial accounts, even if the original money was given away to charity. That last part was grumbled out in annoyance, a glare directed at Midoriya, who crossed his arms and returned the glare. You know I was uncomfortable with using a villain's fortune, even if it was for good. Midoriya looked at Yagi and elaborated. I had Tsuburaya patent a few support items based on old villain tech and some of Mysterio's creations and used the money to fund us legitimately. It didn't feel right to be using money that was originally stolen. Midoriya used those funds to legally purchase the building above us about 4 years ago, with me acting as his online representative for the sale. Though I should clarify that on paper we're listed as a support company called Wondrous Might and Heroism. Tsuburaya continued for Midoriya, gesturing at the crates, being loaded with support gear, some kind of directional gauntlet in one, and a spiked turtle shell-like shield in another. Yagi nodded in understanding. It wasn't uncommon for support companies to have their mainland facilities use aliases or be kept hidden from the general public. This was to prevent villains from breaking in to steal their products and other similar security concerns. However, one part of Tsuburaya's speech caught his attention. You have villain tech here? Yagi asked. Most villains nowadays just use their quirks, with support items being either homemade or bought on the black market, but with very rare exceptions, none of them stood up to pre-quirk era machines like Dr. Octopus's arms or Justin Hammer's titanium man armor. To hear that the studio contained blueprints or even original models was a shocking development to the pro hero. Quentin Beck took notes on everyone he knew. When the villain community needed a fake to take the fall for a crime or Beck just wanted to throw people off during a scheme, he'd be commissioned to build robotic replicas. They were no Doombit or LMD, and sometimes the personality core would malfunction, but they got the job done. Tsuburaya explained. The Sinister Six would often share their notes on their equipment and powers to make their robotic duplicates more realistic, though it was never as good as the originals. I've been working to incorporate some of it into my hero costume, but there's only so much room. Midoriya bit his lip as he looked over his current design for his suit. It was covered in scrawled notes, some of it crossed out or extended past the edge with sticky notes, since there wasn't any more room for the information. The suit itself was large and bulky, to Midoriya's distaste. All that weight would throw him off and make it harder to move around quietly. Chances were he'd have to scrap the design and start again. So, what's with the model building? Yagi asked, coming over to inspect the hologram while Midoriya focused on his costume woes. Poking the green figure, he realized he could manipulate it and reposition it to new spots. The simulation to help Midoriya visualize how he should place his hologram emitters and any robots or drones he might have with him. Midoriya explained. In this specific scenario, a group of 13 villains with randomly generated yet still dangerous quirks have broken into an office building to steal bail bonds and have taken hostages in the process. The pro-heroes he may team up with are also randomly generated, but they're kept outside the building at the start. Success is calculated based upon observed personality profiles, quirk types, and the illusions Midoriya implements. Yagi said, wait, isn't this the premise of an old movie? Die Hard, initially released on July 12, 1988 at the Avco Theater, then en masse on July 15, 1988, starring Bruce Willis and Alan Rickman as the protagonist and antagonist, respectively. The sequels and remakes were not worth the drive space needed to hold them, but the original is a masterpiece. The AI confirmed. I have an extensive knowledge of cinema upon which we can draw upon for inspiration. Yagi quietly nodded. It was clear to the boy and AI that he was impressed, but the worry the pro-hero felt was still obvious. Despite all the assurances from the two, he couldn't help but worry about all the villain technology being used. Yagi knew that it was just tools, and they held no will of their own, save maybe Tsuburaya, but every time he glanced at the holographic figure, he couldn't help but feel his stomach turn. Metaphorically speaking. Sensing the unease, Midoriya put aside his suit blueprints and spoke up. Look, I know there's a stigma against villains and people who are related to them in some way. Midoriya sighed. But I know Mysterio's tech can be used for good, and if something good can come from something evil, then it deserves a chance to prove it, right? Yagi blinked. Unknowingly, Midoriya had brought to mind an untold aspect of One for All. For a moment, Yagi briefly thought of telling Midoriya the origins of the quirk. About the original wielder, sick and helpless yet with a strong sense of justice. The world which gave rise to such power. And the man, the self-proclaimed Demon King, who made said quirk to control another, only to accidentally form a tool for justice. But no. That man was dead. He was gone, and to tell Midoriya of such things would only be adding to the boy's worries. If, heaven forbid, he returned, then yes, All Might would tell Midoriya. But this wouldn't be that day, and he prayed such a day would never come. You're right. Yagi looked at the two. You're willing to place your trust in me, and I've already placed my trust in you. If you're positive that these items can be used to make a hero, then the world had best be ready for the newest illusion hero, Midoriya. Midoriya smiled in joy. A massive weight had been removed from his shoulders. If All Might had faith that Midoriya could redeem the name of Mysterio, then he would put in his best effort to be not only the strongest hero, but the cleverest one as well. And maybe, just maybe, his mother would see things the same way. So, with that out of the way, how exactly do you plan to make Midoriya ready to accept your quirk? A gym trial? Sparring with you or one of the machines here? By cleaning up Dagoba Beach. All Might proclaimed, bulking up in his excitement. Pardon. The ha-ha-oh, the look on your faces. All Might steadied his breath and turned the hologram. Could you please look up the beach online and bring up the images that you find on a screen? Midoriya nodded to Tsuburaya, who started typing on a keyboard that suddenly appeared. Surrounding the three were images of a trash-covered beach. Mountains of garbage, from microwaves and rotting tires to stoves, refrigerators and even entire cars, were left there to rust. There's so much trash, Midoriya sputtered out. That's correct. I did some research last night and found that part of the beach was once beautiful, but the ocean currents let anything that's dropped into the waters flow onto the beach, making it a favorite spot for illegal trash disposal. Because of this, all the locals avoid the area. All Might explained, a hint of sadness in his tone. So, to inherit my quirk, you'll have to clean up that beach. Tsuburaya could not see why All Might would go this route instead of the gym or a training course. Midoriya immediately picked up on All Might's way of thinking. I see, by cleaning up the beach I not only get a workout, I'll be doing the public a service. Midoriya said, his eyes sparkling in eagerness. Got it in one, fanboy. Heroes these days are more focused on stopping flashy villains. A noble cause, but that's still only a single aspect of being a hero. In the old days, before quirks made powers commonplace, serving the public was what mattered, no matter what form it took. That's true. I recall reading how while people like Captain America or the X-Men focused more on international criminals or terrorists, everyday Spider-Man could be found doing anything from finding stray pets, giving directions to people, or plugging leaks in water towers. Tsuburaya noted. Most street-level vigilantes and heroes gain public favor by following his example. He's not wrong. I figure that if you clear away this part of the beach, All Might spun his finger around an overhead view of the beach, but nothing happened. Turning to the AI, the symbol of peace awkwardly asked could you highlight the area I circled? A moment later, that area lit up red. Thank you. As I was saying, I figure that if young Midoriya clears away this part of the beach, he'd be ready to inherit One for All safely. Are you sure? That seems like quite a lot of garbage for Midoriya to handle on his own. Tsuburaya muttered, quietly running the numbers in the background. No, he's right. Midoriya spoke up. I want to get into UA's entrance exam, but it's only 10 months away, so I need to get ready fast. They're the best hero school in the country, but also the toughest to get into. And that's why I made this. All Might pulled out a packet of papers. My handy-dandy aim to pass All-American Dream Plan. Follow this outline, and you'll be ready in no time. Taking the stack, Midoriya looked it over with Tsuburaya observing to archive it. It wasn't just workout routines and meal plans, either. Study sessions, rest days, even my sleep is scheduled. Midoriya whispered, just now comprehending the scale of the task he would have to undertake. I'll be honest with you too. This will be a pretty extreme task, but it's necessary if you want to safely inherit my quirk. All Might admitted somberly. Add that to Midoriya's schoolwork and gadget building, Tsuburaya noted, a pair of spectacles appearing on the bridge of his nose. The odds are slim. But it should be possible with only minimal adjustments made to these plans. I don't care how hard this will be, I know I'll have to work harder than everyone else just to get in. Midoriya admitted, but looked up with a steely resolve at his two mentors. But being a hero has never been easy, so I'll give it my all. Glad to hear it. All Might proclaimed. I'll see you at the beach tomorrow morning, fanboy. And so, just like that, 10 months of absolute hell began for Midoriya. For most of the week, Midoriya would train at Dagoba Beach. The different kinds of trash strained different groups of muscles in Midoriya's body, thus ensuring all parts were being worked on. For the most part, it was just him and All Might. Sometimes Tsuburaya would come by, watching Midoriya train using a drone, but not always. Tsuburaya spent most of the time testing different materials and equipment to add to the suits. He devised and scrapped no less than 6 different Mysterio suits in the first month alone. Midoriya was often left exhausted, but he pushed himself. Even on days he was supposed to be rested, he worked out, even if it was a simple grip trainer used in his non-busy hand while he took notes in class. The other classmates took notice of his efforts, but unless they heard him muttering, they were content to do little more than gossip. Bakugo had been oddly quiet. One part of Midoriya had wondered if him loosening up on his bullying was an indirect way for him to thank Midoriya, while another, more embittered part of him figured that he just didn't want to risk getting into an incident that would keep him out of hero school. Either way, Midoriya wasn't complaining. No bullying meant he wouldn't have to worry about missing a workout day to recover. After school, Midoriya would head to the studio to either review the blueprints he and Tsuburaya drew up or spar, the AI taking command of robotic duplicates of various pro heroes from the modern era and pre-quirk golden age. Midoriya wasn't the best at fighting, especially since he tried to copy All Might's aggressive powerhouse fighting style, despite Tsuburaya's insistence that he do otherwise. Despite this, he never gave up. Eventually, he managed to last long enough in combat against the robotic avatars of Fourth Kind and Gunhead, teaming up to satisfy the AI. So Midoriya changed his focus to memorizing the different formulas and how to combine them to achieve the effects he desired for different scenarios. At home, Inko was shocked at her son's sudden change in lifestyle. When he was 8, he had asked her for a healthier style of eating. To help me become a hero. He'd said. But he'd usually make time for the occasional hanami dango or pocky, but now it seemed he would eat nothing but healthy food and he'd wolf it down like he was starving and still ask for seconds. The exhaustion that seemed to build up as time went on also had her worried. His grades were still good, so she didn't think it was something to bring up just yet, and thus she let it slide. The biggest shock had been when Izuku came to her one morning and showed her that when he was young, he had obtained an AI. An actual AI that was subservient to her boy's wishes, even if he was made by a villain from the past. Izuku had confessed to her how he had obtained it, even showing her the original notebook, kept in a new plastic sleeve to better preserve it. She had yet to visit the studio as they called it, but Izuku had shown her pictures, talking on end about how he was going to use those resources to become a great hero. The passion in his words talking about being a hero was the only thing that made her certain Izuku wasn't being manipulated or, heaven forbid, manipulating her. Inko was, of course, upset with her son withholding this information from her for years at least, until she learned why. It had been a long time since she had thought about Marojingo, the boy everyone treated like a plague when that awful rumor had started. Even she was guilty of pushing that belief onto Izuku just because she was just scared for him. Hearing how this memory had made Izuku scared of her reaction broke her heart. She knew he would never be a villain. His heart was too pure and kind for it, even if she thought he was a bit unrealistic at times. Still, with these resources and that nice trainer Mr. Yagi's help, Inko was now positive that her son would be able to be a great hero. She just wished that she had a way to prove to her son that she was going to support him, no matter what. A way that showed him she was sorry for ever doubting him, for not supporting him when he needed her to, all those years ago. One night, while taking away a lukewarm mug of coffee and some empty energy bar wrappers that surrounded her passed-out son, she glanced at Izuku's open sketchbook and found a way. Eventually, 7 months had passed. Autumn had arrived, and Midoriya was jogging down a tree-lined pathway, struggling to keep up with All Might, the latter riding a Segway in his thin form, a massive coat draped around him like a cloak. Hearing a grunt and thud, All Might stopped, looking back at his chosen successor, the latter laying on the ground, panting heavily, the garbage he was hauling dropped beside him. Hey. You're not going to give up that easily, are you? Just going to flush away all that hard work? All Might was going to continue his berating, but took notice of something else. Midoriya was shaking, far too tired considering the amount of exercise he was doing. You're overworked. The aim to pass American Dream Plan was created with your body type in mind. It was fine-tuned by Tsuburaya to make sure your progress was swift yet manageable. That means. Yogi's eyes narrowed in suspicion. You haven't been following the plan Tsuburaya and I laid out. I know you're eager to get in, but overworking yourself is just going to do more harm than good. It's not enough to just get in, Midoriya groaned out. Yagi glanced down at the boy, who weakly looked up at him. It's not enough to just get in, I want to excel. Midoriya panted out, shaking as he struggled to get up. Everyone else thinks I can't do this, that I can't be a hero. I need to prove otherwise. Prove that I can be the greatest hero in the world. All Might stared at the boy, on his knees and hands, and could only think of how much though he put into the future. With a smile he inflated to his muscular form and stepped off the Segway. You've got a lot of fighting spirit, fanboy. That'll serve you well. All Might proclaimed, lifting the limp child up by the neck of his workout jacket. That being said, overworking yourself won't do you any good. Don't you worry, fanboy. I'll speak with Tsuburaya and these two old men will adjust a dream plan so you'll be at the top of your game come the entrance exam. You're not that old, Midoriya muttered out as the pro-hero gently put him back on his feet. All Might simply laughed and raised his fist to the sky, Midoriya mustering enough strength to look up. Don't you worry, young Midoriya. When the time comes, you'll be able to truly go beyond, plus all. Midoriya. It's Tsuburaya. Midoriya sighed, annoyed that the moment was ruined, and pulled out his phone. What is it? Someone unauthorized is attempting to access the studio. The handprint scanner was nothing, and the secret entrance to the hidden stairs were obvious, so why was this door being so mean? The girl threw back her hair. It was getting long, she noticed, but not long enough to require a haircut. But for now she focused. The obstacle before her, a door with an annoyingly specific randomized question lock, was giving her a surprising amount of trouble. There hadn't been any visible screws to remove the panel so she couldn't hook up her decryptor, and she was sure that lasering the lock off would have been seen as rude, so she was stuck trying to answer movie trivia questions of all things. Who played the first Dracula? Gary Oldman, right. She typed it in, only for the lock to reject the answer and make a loud buzzer noise. She was starting to get frustrated, she would admit. She just wanted to talk to the person who had made that amazing gauntlet that showed up on the news 7 months ago. Was that too much to ask? Okay, yeah, maybe looking him up online, learning what school he went to, following him from a distance once he was let out, and breaking into his secret lab was a bit far, but as a fellow genius, she just wanted to share some ideas and maybe team up to build some amazing. Who the heck are you? Spinning around, her smile widened. At last, the one she had come here to see. Along with a hologram of an older Englishman and some living skeleton. Whatever, the boy she had spent months tracking down was finally in front of her. So caught up in the moment, she said the first thing that came to her mind which, as always happened due to her excitement, probably was not the most tactful of statements. My name is Mei Hatsum, and I'm here to make babies with you. What Midoriya shouted. Babies. Midoriya had gone into the human equivalent of the blue screen of death. Who could blame him? He had come to the lab expecting some thugs, or worse a pro-hero, not a teenage girl with pink dreadlocks, yellow crosshairs in her eyes, and a large pair of goggles. Stare only at the goggles, for the love of All Might, do not look down. While Tsuburaya was one to indulge in schadenfreude, he knew now was not the best time and instead cleared his throat. Well, he made the noise, at least. And by babies you mean. Gadgets. Machines. Gizmos. Dingamabobs. Dinglehoppers. Support items. The intruder elaborated on, either not noticing the green-haired boy's distress or just not caring. I saw his amazing device on the news and wanted to share notes. That explanation did slightly calm Midoriya down. Not enough to even begin to relax him, but now he could think clearly without images appearing in his head. Perhaps we should discuss this upstairs. Tsuburaya suggested. Midoriya was immediately in agreement, but a quick sniff made him rethink his eagerness. Actually, mind waiting while I shower off real quick? I'm fine with waiting. May agreed, pushing past Midoriya and going upstairs as if it was normal for her to break into a private building and talk to the owner and their AIs. With little other choice, Yagi followed her, Tsuburaya shut off his projection, and Midoriya went to the studio's shower room. Before he could even begin getting undressed, a shocking thought had entered his head. Holy crap, I talked to a girl. Settling down on a couch in the backrooms, May pulled out one of her inventions and began fiddling with it, humming a tuneless noise as she worked. Rising from the ground in a zombie-like state, Tsuburaya shuffled towards May with a snarl, although aside from a quick glance upwards, she didn't really seem to care about the walking corpse. Toshinori, already used to Tsuburaya's penchant for theatrics, got to work picking up the DVDs May had thrown aside while attempting to enter the hidden staircase. Seeing the general lack of a reaction, Tsuburaya tried a more standardized approach. I think introductions are in order. That's Mr. Toshinori, Izuku Midoriya's personal trainer, and my name is Tsuburaya. May I ask how exactly you found this location? Tsuburaya asked, restoring his avatar to a proper human form. Little did he know of the avalanche he'd be experiencing in only a moment. Nice entrance. Did Greenie design that intro animation? Oh, wait, you asked me a question. Well, after Greenie showed off his neat smoke gauntlet and glasses in that villain attack, I just knew I had to see him. So I spent a few months writing up an algorithm to track his online profile down, but that didn't work, so I had to check the schools in the area, and 2 months ago it found him, so I tried to get his attention, but he was always in a hurry, so I couldn't get to him in time before he got home. Since it's super rude to bother people at home, I decided to try and find him somewhere else, so I followed him for a few weeks, but still wasn't able to catch him. Then I realized he was intentionally being confusing, most likely to hide his lab, so I rewrote my algorithm to instead track the trains and streets he used, and last week I triangulated the location of the store, but some creepy lady would be watching me whenever I'd approach the store, which usually wouldn't deter me, but she had a really nasty looking Bakken sword at her side. So I stayed back until this morning, when she left for I think one of those public bathhouses. Anyways, I knew that was my best chance to get in, so I threw together a baby to get past any security and came here. I managed to find the panel easily enough thanks to the micro seams in the wood being visible to my quirk, and there were scuff marks in the carpet that let me know that the shelf moved, so I pulled down DVDs until I found the right one. That door lock stopped me from going any further though, and I was getting super frustrated until Greenie and the hospital patient found me. Mei Hatsume had spoken all that without having stopped to breathe and looked at the two observing her with a large smile. Yagi and Tsuburaya could only stare, the former having picked up only every other word said by the motor-mouth inventor. Tsuburaya didn't have that problem, but even he had been stunned by the sheer energy the girl had. Taking a moment to process everything, he spoke up again. You thought that visiting Midoriya at home was rude, but you were okay with breaking into private property? Tsuburaya questioned incredulously. Oh, is that Greenie's name? Mei asked. Too long, I think I'll call him either Dory or Greenie. But yeah, I got excited to see him. Great inventors hold conversations through their inventions. By beating his security, I knew that he would be impressed and would let me join him in making babies. I think I understand. Tsuburaya muttered after a moment of thought. Before he could ask more questions, the shelf of DVDs, now refilled, moved to the side and out emerged Midoriya, clean and sporting a green jacket over an All Might t-shirt and green cargo shorts. After that relaxing shower, Midoriya was certain he could handle the hyperactive girl who tried to break into his workshop. Orya, make babies with me, Mei immediately shouted to the teenage boy. Never mind. Midoriya just stood there, paralyzed in shock, a strangled noise escaping from his throat as his brain attempted another reboot. Yagi sighed and came over to Midoriya, shaking his shoulder until he snapped out of it. She tracked you down because she wants to work with you, kid. Summarized Yagi to his apprentice. Oh. Midoriya recovered. You want to work with me? Yeah. Your gauntlet and glasses were amazing. You built a fully functional alert system and a portable support item out of garbage. You're the kinda guy I want to be making babies with. Mei stated, again not caring how her words would be taken out of context. Thankfully, Midoriya only flinched at the words instead of locking up. You were impressed. It wasn't anything special, I just dumpster dived for most of the materials and I couldn't even get the holograms working earlier that. Holograms, Mei interrupted in excitement, sitting up. Midoriya leaned back, unused to being given so much positive attention by people his age. Yeah. The gauntlets are supposed to emit a special fog that made holograms look more solid, since the requirements to give the holograms continuous form retention is limited by computing power and space on the gauntlet. Mei finished, eyes dilating in joy. But if you add microcircuitry to the glove, you'd have more than enough processor power to keep the hologram stable, no matter how much lighter material passes through it. I know, Midoriya admitted. The problem is we don't yet have the equipment to build microcircuitry in a cost-effective way. And ordering such items to this location draws the wrong kind of attention. Suburaya added. Indeed, the whole reason the Dr. Reinhardt form had been created was that the delivery men that dropped off materials needed to develop Mysterio's suit had insisted upon retrieving signatures on their tablets, threatening to call the police if it wasn't done. Midoriya had only been 10, none of the robots in storage looked human or were dexterous enough to believably hold a pen, and Suburaya was still using the Mysterio look, so neither of them could have done so. It was only thanks to Miss Yoshida's timely appearance that the delivery men didn't report the area as a possible spot for villain activity. Oh, is that it? I figured out how to do that in my first year of junior high. May bragged. Wait, you can make microcircuitry? Midoriya couldn't believe his ears. Yup. May pointed to her eyes. My quirk, Zoom, lets me see a mouse from up to 5 kilometers away in great clarity. What's more, I was able to build so many amazing babies by focusing on the inner workings. It's also how I discovered the seams along the hidden panels and the signs of the passageways in this building. That's amazing. Midoriya came closer, pulling out his quirk analysis notebook, much to May's amusement. Just how good is your quirk's magnification on an object sitting before you? The two went on and on, discussing her quirk and the various inventions the two had worked on. All the while, Suburaya was watching in silence. He had been uncertain of how to categorize the girl with pink dreadlocks, but now he knew that she was a potential threat, should she choose to be. While she did not seem to have any intention of revealing the studio's location, she was an uninhibited, shameless person, especially when presented with babies, so the chances of her spilling the studio's location to the public before Midoriya determined they were ready was simply too great. If only there was a way to ensure she'd keep quiet. Killing her was right out. Midoriya would have refused to allow such a thing, not to mention he would have been very upset with Suburaya, and they lacked the means of effectively hiding the body, so that idea was discarded almost instantly. His attempt at scaring her with a zombie showed that she was not one easily intimidated. Banishing her was no good, since she was able to breach all but the last line of defense, and it was only due to luck that she didn't manage to do so. Moving locations was also unfeasible, since they lacked the time, manpower, and means to get everything out without drawing attention, to say nothing of locating and/or modifying a new space that would fit their needs. In addition, the girl had shown to be dangerously clever and not above bending the rules when she thought the situation called for it. He could threaten her, but again, Midoriya would have disapproved. With all this in mind, Suburaya came to what he believed to be the best option, as much as he felt it was one that held its own risks. Miss Hatsum, how would you like a job? That got everyone in the room to look at him. Midoriya was gaping like a fish, May's smile grew to Cheshire Cat levels, and Yagi was in shock. A job? Midoriya stuttered out. Ooh, you've got my interest, hologram. May smirked while Yagi stood up. Hold it, May is only a child, he started, glaring at the AI. Actually I'll be 16 in April, so legally I can start working now. May interrupted, a manic gleam in her eyes. Lem at the babies. But. Midoriya. Yagi tried again. Is 15 the legal age to be working, and as the legal owner of this property, he is within his rights to hire anyone that he so chooses. Suburaya countered. But Yagi searched for anything to dissuade the AI. May doesn't have an official support gear license yet. She needs to get through hero school first. Which is why she will not be working on the larger projects directly. Suburaya clarified. Ignoring the pout May was giving him and Yagi, he continued. Instead, she will be acting as a consultant and making the individual parts of the items, which is perfectly legal, and those parts will be assembled by myself, commanding machines, into the completed support gear to be sold. It's a legal loophole that we've exploited before, back when Midoriya and I were coming up with the means for funding his ambitions. And I don't mind working for a guy younger than me. May added, practically vibrating in excitement. With funding I can afford proper and bigger materials for my babies and gain some workplace experience. Suburaya raised his hands in a placating manner. Hold on, before we can officially employ you, some things need to be clarified. Though visibly annoyed, May sat back down on the couch, arms crossed. Midoriya swallowed his spit and turned to Suburaya and nodded. Seeing this as permission to continue, Suburaya explained himself. This location is meant to be private. Behind the door downstairs are devices that need to remain confidential, but I calculate that you are not one to be driven or bribed away. In addition, your skills have proven to be a potentially useful resource for us, therefore I believe our best option to ensure your silence is an employment contract, starting with an NDA, or a non-disclosure agreement so I can't tell anyone, I know. Lem have it so I can sign it, May said impatiently. Suburaya nodded, and from a printer in the corner of the room, the document was formed. May practically ran to the printer, snatched the paper, and quickly scanned it. Though excited, she was still careful to read it multiple times and think it over. Her mother didn't raise a fool, after all. Once she finished making sure the NDA was acceptable, she ran past Yagi, grabbing a pen from a Godzilla mug and writing her name and signature down on the bottom line. Done, so what you working on? Midoriya scanned the document before nodding in satisfaction. This place is the secret location of the support item company, Wondrous Might and Heroism. Mei's eyes widened and a huge smile appeared upon her face. I see you know who we are. Of course. You guys are small, but you've got some of the most effective babies on the market. Mei said excitedly. Thanks, though admittedly we can't really take all the credit for inventing some of those items, Midoriya said, rubbing his neck nervously. Why not? Mei asked before gasping, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. Hang on, you didn't steal them. No, no, no. Midoriya immediately threw his hands up, panicking. It's just that. The inventions we sold are either copies of or derived from non-patented technology used by pre-Quirk era villains. Midoriya calmly explained, a holographic cloud of smoke surrounding him until he was standing before the three in his original Mysterio avatar. Mei's jaw dropped as he continued. This technology was unclaimed and out of public usage, thus within our legal right to use as we saw fit, including to allow the new Mysterio to be a hero. Mei fell silent, her jaw closed. It seemed that for once, she had been rendered silent. Not wanting her to get the wrong idea, Midoriya quietly spoke up. I know the rep that people related to villains get, so if this makes you uncomfortable, then we can. Are you kidding? Everyone jumped back as Mei leapt up, the fire of eagerness within her eyes. A reputation for taking the babies of baddies and reworking them to be used by the heroes of tomorrow. Standing on the couch, she threw her fist into the air and proclaimed to the shocked trio, this company's rep will garner so much attention, I bet that we'll become legendary. We? So? You mean? Midoriya asked. I'm on board, new Mysterio. Mei pointed to him. We're gonna be so famous. Or infamous. Either way, people will notice us and our babies. I just wanna know when we'll go public. Midoriya fell silent, silently debating, before coming to a decision. The UA Sport Festival. Everyone will be watching, and people will see that we're not afraid of salvaging villain tech to build a better tomorrow. Oh, thinking of attending UA too, me too. It cannot possibly get any more perfect. Mei turned to the AI, who was still in shock at how unbothered Mei was. Draw up an employment contract, and I promise you my babies will give us all the attention we could ever want. And thus, an unexpected but welcome new member had been added to Team Mysterio. Midoriya got to work on a contract, promising Mei full rights to her creations, despite being an open hire, so she was free to go to any other business that caught her eye or start up her own business. Mei said that it was unlikely that she would leave Wondrous Might and Heroism for another, but accepted the terms. She began work that very day. Within a week, she had solved many of Midoriya's suit's problems and suggested new additions to the items. In a month, she and Midoriya built the skeleton of Midoriya's costume. She spent her free time tinkering and experimenting in the workshop, though she had to be moved to a side room after one of her babies, a modified vest version of the Scorcher's armor, nearly set a Mysterio costume on fire. It was only a few days before the UA entrance exams. Toshinori drove to the beach in an old pickup truck, Midoriya's drone in the truck's bed. The two were expecting Midoriya to be hard at work, clearing away one of the few piles of appliances that were left. Instead, as they pulled in, they heard a scream. Toshinori hurried out as Midoriya took to the air, both concerned, but instead they became still, amazement overcoming the two of them. The entire beach had been cleared out. Even outside the designated areas, the scrapped remains of various appliances had been removed. The only sign of it was a tall pile, upon which stood Midoriya, screaming his lungs out to the rising sun, his sweat-covered chest bare for the world to see. He actually did it. Midoriya stuttered out, shocked. So shocked that he activated his Dr. Reinhardt hologram just to properly convey his shock, even dramatically throwing off his spectacles in amazement. Holy stinkin' super crap. Midoriya, limp and exhausted, fell from the pile. Midoriya wasn't concerned. As he predicted, only microseconds later, All Might rushed forward and caught the boy, a look of immeasurable pride radiating from his smiling face. You did it, young Midoriya, and with only a few days to spare. I cleared everything in sight, did I do enough? Indeed you did, Mantle Bear. Midoriya hovered over and generated a hologram of Midoriya from the previous year before generating another one. This is you, 10 months ago. And this is you as you are now. While Midoriya wasn't scrawny before he met All Might, his new self, compared to the old version, looked like a small bodybuilder. Clearly chiseled and defined muscles lined the boy's torso and arms, marking the completion of his journey to bearing the strength of All Might's great power. Am I? Midoriya asked the muscle-bound pro-hero. You are. All Might said, gently setting Midoriya down. You are ready to inherit this great legacy in addition to the other mantle you plan to bear. But. Are you sure? I just met you through luck. Ahahaha. Still doubting yourself, fanboy All Might asked. Lem tell you something my mentor once said. There is a difference between being lucky and being deserving. One is happenstance and the other is a reward. Never get them confused. And speaking of rewards. The giant of a man reached up to his signature hair and pulled out a single strand, clenching it between two fingers. You worked your backside off, studied hard, and poured all your skills into making it here, young Izuku Midoriya. I promise you, you are worthy of this awesome power. Now All Might leaned to Midoriya, who with tired quirkless hands, reached forward to claim his prize. Eat this? Huh? I think my audio sensors glitched, did he just tell you to? He did, Midoriya confirmed, looking at the hair in slight horror. Haha, I guess I forgot to mention that you had to eat a bit of my DNA to inherit my quirk. All Might explained sheepishly. Yeah, why do I have to eat this? Midoriya asked, disgust welling up. All Might rolled his eyes and shoved the strand towards Midoriya's mouth. Well, it was either this or I spat in your mouth, now eat. 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 What? The next few seconds were blocked from Tsuburaya's memory by his own choice, but when his vision was restored, a thoroughly unhappy-looking Midoriya was covering his mouth and All Might was looking down at him. It tasted like hair gel and regret, he whimpered out. The next few minutes were spent with All Might loading his truck with all the trash it could carry, since some of the junk pile was too big for his one truck to haul on its own. Midoriya, meanwhile, decided to clean himself off in the beach's nearby shower stalls. After exiting the showers, while putting his shoes on, something occurred to Midoriya that he had been wondering about but never got the courage to ask. Hey All Might, if I have your quirk now, what does that mean for you? That is a good question. Does that mean you are unable to be a hero now? Tsuburaya asked. Midoriya immediately began to tear up in horror at the implications. Before the waterworks, unrelated to the shower, could begin, All Might deflated to his weaker form and held up his hands placatingly. Calm down. I'm not out of the game yet. That calmed Midoriya down enough for Yagi to continue. Well, it's true that I will eventually have to stop being a hero. I do have some residual embers within me, I guess you could say. That'll be enough for me to continue heroing for 2 years, maybe even 3 if I don't push myself. But. That means it's my fault, you Midoriya whimpered out before All Might pointed at him. None of that, Midoriya. He shouted. This was going to happen whether or not I had found a successor. Truth be told, I should have retired after my injury. But now I can rest easy knowing that the next symbol of peace has been found and hatched. Does this mean we're going to start work on my quirk? Midoriya asked, brushing aside All Might's choice in words. Well, once the hair finishes digesting in 3 hours, yeah. Yagi explained, Midoriya shuddering at the memory of the experience. Turning to the stairs out of the beach, Yagi continued. Tsuburaya and I ordered some equipment we can use to help you gauge the full output of your power, and we had May clear up the front of the store to act as a training area. What did you tell her it was for? Midoriya asked, following behind his flesh and blood mentor. May was a part of WMH, yes, but she was not made privy to who Yagi truly was, or that Midoriya had been quirkless the whole time he had known her. When she had asked about his quirk, Midoriya said that he had anxieties about using it. She didn't appear to believe him, but for once, respected his desire for privacy. We said that you experienced a quirk awakening and that you were concerned with how it would affect your support items. Tsuburaya explained, dismissing the hologram while the drone folded itself up for Midoriya to carry in his lap. Since we need to see how your equipment would handle the quirk anyways, it seemed like a reasonable explanation. Yeah, I can see that, Midoriya admitted as he climbed into the truck. So since May is probably going to be there, I should probably ask how to use one for all now. Good idea. Yagi agreed before remembering something. Oh. Real quick, Lem send a message first. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Midoriya sat in the passenger seat and wondered who All Might would have been calling. Sir Night-Eye, maybe? No, not likely, they had a falling out years prior. Maybe it's All Might's own mentor or a previous one for all user. It'd make the most sense since they had experience using it even if it's gone from their bodies. Okay, good. I'll see you there. Hanging up, Yagi turned to Midoriya who stopped his mental tangent. Chiem will meet us above the studio, in the testing area. Who's that? Midoriya asked. The nurse at UA, you probably know her as All Might began. The youthful heroine, recovery girl, Midoriya finished, excitedly. Wait, does she know about One for All? Yeah, she helped me out when I first got it and also was involved in the surgery following my injury. Yagi explained. Since her quirk immediately heals most injuries, she's our best bet to handle any accidents that might come from using One for All. So how do I use it? Midoriya asked. Yagi raised his left fist. Well, you clench your buttocks tight. What? Midoriya yelped. And yell smash from the bottom of your heart. Yagi stuck his arm out the window of his truck to punctuate his statement. Pulling his arm back into the cabin of the truck, he continued. At least, that's how it works for me. The power manifests itself differently depending on the person. You mentioned months ago that Midoriya would not be able to handle the full output safely. What is the most likely result of this, and how do you plan to rectify it? Tsuburaya, speaking through Midoriya's phone, asked. Well, first Midoriya will have to use the power. That way he can get a feel for how 100% power-up feels, then we can work on adjusting his output to something more manageable. Yagi said. Though that means Midoriya will probably end up breaking an arm. Which is why you called Recovery Girl to sit in. Midoriya added, though he still looked uneasy at the idea of intentionally breaking an arm, even if it was going to be fixed moments later. Yeah, exactly. Yagi confirmed. Does she know about my inheritance? Midoriya asked. She knows you have an AI and a workshop, but not the source of those items. Yagi assured the boy, who visibly relaxed in his seat. 3 hours and a few trips to the junkyard later, they reached the studio, Toshinori parking his truck close by. While he fed the parking meter, Midoriya climbed out, Tsuburaya's drone under his arm. Morning Midoriya. Miss Yoshida called from her favorite spot, eating a bit of tempura shrimp in a styrofoam container. Morning Abe-san. Midoriya cheerfully called out. Listen, I'm going to be testing some things here, so don't be concerned if it gets a bit loud. Oh, and if an old lady comes by asking for us, can you direct her around the back? Of course. She said happily. Have fun testing your toys. Come on, kid. Yagi called. Midoriya followed him into the back of the store, then to the front, now cleaned up and remade into an impromptu gym. Mei was already there, getting a pressure plate hooked up to her homemade laptop. She was so immersed in her work that Midoriya had stepped inside and set down Tsuburaya's drone in its charging station before she finally noticed him. Orya. Mei greeted the boy happily from her spot while Tsuburaya appeared as a mummy emerging from a sarcophagus before the bandages fell away to reveal his Dr. Reinhardt avatar. Ignoring the hologram's need for theatrics, Mei continued. You said you needed help making sure your babies could handle your quirk's new output, right? Yeah, I got a sudden quirk awakening and gained an increase in power, but now I can't really control it, so I wanted to make sure my support items would be fine. Midoriya nervously lied. If Mei suspected anything, she gave no indication, just smiling eagerly as she brought over a small box labeled test babies. Well, we can't have you breaking your babies. What was your previous output? She asked, getting in real close to the Viridian-haired boy. While Midoriya had gotten somewhat used to the pink-haired genius, he still found himself getting uncomfortable with her at times. Well. A little under 4 billion joules. Yagi stated without hesitation. Mei turned to him in shock before immediately running to her laptop to plug in the numbers. Thank you. Midoriya mouthed to his mentor, who just subtly nodded. Midoriya dug into the box, picking out a prototype Mysterio gauntlet. It was a boxy thing, with hidden panels holding small die-size holocubes and plastic vials of various chemicals used in Mysterio's fog. Sewn into the palm of the golden glove was a flat eye-shaped pattern, hiding an offensive laser and hologram projector. The metal was unpainted and a few wires were exposed, secured by zip ties, but it functioned and was capable of doing anything that Mysterio would require of it. Besides, they weren't testing the gauntlet's aesthetics. Slipping the gauntlet on, Midoriya activated it, the small plexiglass screen on the back lighting up with statistics and a command menu, not that Midoriya was going to actually use it. Alrighty, we're all set for the test. Just go to the dummy and punch with all your strength. Mei called up. Beside her, Tsuburaya focused on the scene before them, ready to record the results. Midoriya nodded, stepping forward. Recalling the stances Tsuburaya showed him, Midoriya raised his arm. A surge of energy poured into his limb, a red glow radiating from the arm itself, and, with a mighty yell of smash, Midoriya punched the dummy-mounted pressure plate. The effect was like a massive cannon firing against a football. The dummy snapped off its secure housing and was sent flying into the back wall, the rubbery material that made up the dummy flattening from the pressure like a cheap toy, while the plate itself cracked almost in half, and the Air Force had Tsuburaya not accounted for the wind pressure in designing the test. Midoriya's attack would have easily torn not just through the reinforced concrete wall, but at least 5 other walls beyond it before slowing down. Thankfully he had, and instructed Mei to place several directional tubes with mesh covers on the wall, so instead the wind was channeled up into the air, where nothing was damaged, save perhaps a few eardrums, belonging to some now irate pigeons. Needless to say, Mei was stunned. Midoriya had said he had a super strength type quirk, but that was like comparing a domesticated kitten to a fully grown tiger. Already her mind began calculating what would need to be done to get the Mysterio suit capable of withstanding the pressure, the materials and possible methods they could use, but her brain skidded to a halt when her laptop showed her just how much power she would have to account for. Holy. Your output was just over 231,816 million joules of energy, Mei shouted excitedly. 231 billion, Midoriya yelped, holding his punching arm, his face contorted in pain. Mei glanced down at the limb and immediately felt sick. She was no stranger to injuries. When her babies blew up in her face, she would usually treat her own wounds when she could, since hospital trips were both expensive and usually a waste of time. But even she had never experienced an arm breakage as horrible as the one her boss had. His arm was covered in a giant bruise, spreading up to his elbow, clearly shattered from the sheer output of the punch. Midoriya's fingers trembled, twitching uselessly in angles that they shouldn't have been in. Midoriya was tearing up, not that she blamed him, only conscious through his sheer force of will, though it was clear that the pain was far worse than anything he was used to. Clinging to his arm, but only barely, were the remains of the Mysterio gauntlet. Only now it was a warped piece of fabric, metal and plastic. The actual glove had surprisingly remained largely intact, only tearing along the edges where it had been attached to the metal, but the laser and projector were in pieces, the bulletproof screen for the controls was cracked and darkened, and the circuit boards had shattered like cheap glass, falling to the ground in pieces with every movement. The metal frame and panels had peeled back like a banana, or those ancient American cartoons involving the devious rabbit and the hunter with the plug guns. It stayed on Midoriya's broken limb only because it was otherwise in one piece, though Mei wasn't sure how much longer it would stay that way. Secretly though, she was relieved that none of the pieces had torn into Midoriya's arm. No wonder he didn't like showing off his quirk if his previous usage was anything like this. "Thought that was a lot more power than I was expecting," Tsuburaya stated, a tone of worry leaking through his otherwise calm words as he observed Midoriya painfully pull off the remains of his support item to place on the folding table where Mei's laptop was. "You said it," Mei said, ignoring Tsuburaya's glare at the unwanted nickname. "And what were you expecting to happen?" Everyone immediately turned to the back door. Standing there, leaning on a cane stylized to look like a massive hypodermic needle, was a short old woman in a doctor's coat with her hair done up in a bun, glaring at the group with an intense gaze. Yagi came over, trying to placate the upset healer. "Re-recovery girl, I can exply ah." Judging by how she was hitting him with her cane repeatedly though, it looked as if explanations weren't going to be enough. "I'm sorry." Midoriya whimpered out, trying not to move his arm. I wanted to see how strong my new power levels were, so I got excited and decided to do something reckless." Recovery girl interrupted with a sigh. "I swear, one of these days you people will be the death of me. Well, stay there and let me make it all better." Approaching the young man, she puckered up her lips, stretching them out far until she covered a good chunk of his arm. A soft green glow emanated from Midoriya's arms, and in mere seconds the bones reconnected, the bruising faded, and all the parts snapped back to their original places. Recovery girl pulled back, not surprised to see the now fully healed young man had grown visibly exhausted. Yagi ran over with a folding chair, catching Midoriya just before he fell to the ground. "Thanks," Midoriya breathed out, wanting nothing more than to take a nap. "Why's Doria so tired?" Mei asked. "It's part of my quirk, dearie." Recovery girl explained, handing Midoriya a bit of candy which he gratefully popped into his mouth. "My quirk can heal your body in seconds, but it uses up your own stamina to do so. Major injuries like this can exhaust you, and if the damage is too severe, I'd have to either wait for you to get enough stamina, do surgery beforehand, play several smaller kisses over a period of time, or some combination thereof. Of course, that's only in extreme cases done by idiots and dunderheads." That last comment was directed at Yagi, who gulped and shuffled away like a frightened schoolboy. Mei figured that comment was related to Mr. Yagi's sickly appearance, but decided that it was probably rude to pry, so instead she chose to focus on what she was qualified for. "Well, it looks like Tsubu and I have our work cut out for us," she proclaimed, snapping her laptop shut and putting it on her back. "Please do not call me that," Tsuburaya asked her, though Mei didn't respond, focusing instead on gathering the pieces of the ruined gauntlet in a plastic bag. "I'm going to head downstairs and study the data we got, see if I can't find a way to keep your babies from breaking," Mei cheerfully called out, heading for the lab. After Tsuburaya gave them the signal that she was gone, Yagi turned to Midoriya. "So, now that you got a feel for One for All, can you describe it?" Blinking away his tiredness, Midoriya tried hard to put into words what the sensation had felt like. "Yeah, it was like a buzz, or kapow, or oh, I know. Like an egg in a microwave that's about to explode." "Ha ha ha, that's a pretty lame analogy, kid, but what the hey if it works." Yagi laughed, ignoring Midoriya's embarrassed look. "So, now that you've discovered how it feels, you can change the output, or to use your analogy, regulate the wattage to a point that the egg cooks without bursting." "Okay, I think I understand." Midoriya yawned, rubbing his eyes. "For now get some rest, dearie." Recovery girl said gently, settling down into another chair nearby. But my mom Midoriya tried to get up only to fall back down in his chair, eyes half-lidded. I'll contact her and let her know about your sudden development and handle the paperwork for your quirk. Tsuburaya promised. Thanks Tsuburaya. Midoriya fell into a nap only moments later. Smiling softly, Yagi laid Midoriya's favorite All Might hoodie on him like a blanket. You certainly picked a unique successor, Toshinori. Recovery girl remarked. I know, Yagi said, a proud smile on his face. He's going to be like no other, I'm sure of it. Thanks for watching guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.